Gonna get out of here in an hour? I don't think so.
45 minutes, you just
Okay.
gotta want it.
I'm retracting my bet.
I think we can do it, we can sign fast.
Okay, we'll do our best. Okay, noting that it is just after 7 PM on February 6, 2019, I'm calling the Board of Health meeting to order. We have one scheduled appointment on the agenda, a variety of ongoing and new business, and I'm going to announce any items to be added to the agenda as not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of the meeting, and then we can vote whether we want to add these items. One is a septic alteration plan for review and approval, and I assume that's from the agent. And then I attended the Dover Board of Health meeting this past Monday for a number of reasons, but they brought up the issue of vaccination rates at Dover Sherborn schools, and we could have a discussion about that because I think they felt it is something that should be done in a timely manner and really couldn't wait until our next meeting. So, do we have a motion to, is there anything else anyone would like to add?
That's lovely.
Okay, do we have a motion to amend the agenda with those two items?
So moved.
Second.
Any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So, let's start with the vaccination rates while it's fresh in my mind. So, there have been measles outbreaks in Oregon. There were several cases of measles in northeast Massachusetts. And there seemed to be something possibly on record for Dover. It wasn't crystal clear. They were not sure it was a definite case, but in any case, they had, someone from their board had contacted the Dover Sherborn Regional School Administration to see if they could get information about how many students were vaccinated for what kind of diseases, just to understand what the coverage was. And so they haven't been able to get that information yet because apparently,
Sorry.
because apparently, with the plastic bag. So they weren't able to get that. Apparently, parents can get a waiver for their children for various reasons for certain vaccinations. So they just wanted to understand that and see if it's a big issue, something to address, and they wanted to know if we were interested in, sharing in that request for data from the schools.
I would support that.
I mean, nothing with names tied to it,
No,
but
no, it's
just.
a
But just general,
percentage
like, do we
and-
have 80%
Right,
MMR,
right.
or do we have
99.
95%
Yeah.
MMR? It's sort of worth knowing and thinking about in this context, especially as you get lower and lower, the sort of herd immunity effects get riskier.
Yes.
And were if there are exemptions, what were they for? Because there's philosophical exemptions and religious, and then there's actual, if
Real
you have a
ones.
depressed immune system, and there are certain medical reasons to perhaps delay vaccination. So I would want to know that as well, so.
Right.
Yeah, and it's anonymous, it's just numbers, it's not people, so I don't see what the issue is.
And I think you could even sort of, if you wanted to further, like, I think the kind of exemptions you just worry they're, like, depending on what the sample size is, it may be like, you're the only kid who has this. So, like, in some ways, I might do at least start in the first pass with the overall.
Oh, yeah,
rate.
yeah, yeah.
And then if we're like really high, I wouldn't dig into the exemption
Absolutely.
reasons.
Right,
Yeah.
because if it's like
Okay.
15 or 20 kids are not getting it, then that's a robust enough data set that there can be anonymity and
Yeah.
we can find out more. But it could be a non-issue, too.
Yep.
Right.
And,
And they think that the school has the data. Well, they know that they have the
have to
data,
have the
but they
data.
think it might be supplied to the state. They're not positive or in what form. So we're hoping it's not a tedious thing that they have to dig through a lot of paper
I'm gonna
files or
see
something,
right
but,
now. Okay.
so, in any case, we have a motion that we're in agreement to tell Dover that we share the interest of obtaining that data?
So moved?
And maybe with the adder of your issue of, for the first round, not getting the reasons for the
Right,
exemptions, and then reassess and decide whether that's important or not.
What's the vaccination rate at our school? Mass parents can now look it up. So we might be able to find this
Oh,
out.
answer it right here.
I don't know if it has all the schools, though. Click to enlarge. Oh, so if we go to the Mass Public Health website, we might be able to research it. I probably can't do it on my phone, but I'd be happy to,
Okay,
or someone can look into that. So it might be available.
okay. If you're willing to look that up.
I will.
And then before, so we could maybe go ahead with this motion, but it might be tempered with, we're interested with you, but hey, we found it. Yeah.
So it's really,
Published
if you
somewhere.
look by county, it's really interesting. So most of Massachusetts looks like it's about a 1% exemption rate, but when you go down to, what is that, Martha's Vineyard, it's 12%.
Oh, okay.
So does it have it, though, by school district, or is it
I'm not
county?
in there yet. Let's see if I can, yeah, it's interesting. But the data I have right now is county, but I don't know if that means it's not by school somewhere else.
Okay. So we'll check
Okay,
into it.
so we can check.
But I think, again, I think if it's publicly available, great. If it's data that can be appropriately shared with the board, it certainly would be helpful because it could be a target of, interest to us, especially if we're then later faced with a measles epidemic. You'd say, well, that was unfortunate.
Right, it may change emergency planning
Yeah.
provisions, or just how we think about that and what have you, so, okay. So did we have that motion? I can't remember.
Yeah,
We
there
had
was
the
a motion. It wasn't seconded yet.
Second.
Okay, and any other discussion, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Would you like to do 136 South Main?
That has been in front of the board previously. It was to do an addition to their barn, and one of the conditions was to assure the present building pipe where the sewage comes out of the barn is connected to an appropriate septic tank. So Paul Sonia designed a septic tank. The old one's right here, it's gonna be removed. It's underneath the driveway, so we'll be using cast iron covers to access it. It's a 2-compartment, 2,500 gallon tank. And he had not put on the inverts. I talked with him Monday and yesterday, and he finally added the invert to the barn, as well as I gave him the invert to the tank from an as-built plan. It's ready for approval, but on Monday I spoke to Rob Scott, because I asked Paul if he knew the condition of the septic pipe, this pipe going from the barn to this new tank. And he said Scott Septic would know that because they're the ones that evaluated it for him. So with that said, Rob Scott indicated he would send us a report. I do not have that report yet, but I would ask that the plan be approved conditional to the report received on the condition of this pipe, which was never inspected by the Board of Health, put in previously by the previous owner. So this new owner bought a property with a pipe going from the barn to a septic tank without any permits.
Okay.
It wasn't the present owner that did it.
And will part of that report be to confirm the pathway of that pipe?
Exactly.
Okay.
Because I asked Paul, I said, how do you know it's
Location,
there?
yeah.
Yeah, he's indicating it's there from a report from Rob Scott. So he drew it in according to what Rob Scott told him.
Okay. All right. So do we have a motion to approve the plan as presented, conditional to receipt of the report?
Rob Scott said.
So moved.
Second.
All in
Any other
favor?
questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then just going back to the prior discussion, there is school-level data. It looks like Pine Hills, 96 to 98%, depending on the vaccine compliance.
Oh,
And so
okay.
there's publicly available data for
For
2017-18. So I
Okay.
think,
And what about Dover?
Okay. So I will,
and so I think it still may be helpful. I can look at Dover. That was the kindergarten rate. But it seems like, I'm not sure that we actually need them to produce something.
Right.
And so I
Yeah.
think it's a question of, Dover, for Chickering is 98 to 100%.
Okay.
okay, can
So this
you-
might not be an issue.
Yeah, can you email that link to
Ellen?
Health? Yeah,
Perfect.
Ellen, and then maybe you can let Karen over at the Dover Board of Health know that
Let's see if that sort of answers the question, if there's a
That-
distinct question.
this board decided, voted to support the effort to collect the data, but also found
It online.
We Googled it.
You can say that really diplomatically. Or if
Yeah,
I
I'm
sent it to you,
teasing.
Ellen.
Okay, thank
All right.
you.
That would also be a public record, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. So if other people wanted to look it up, they could find it.
Yeah. So, okay, excellent. All right, so we have 13 minutes.
I could do the two septics if you wish.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Which,
The
Both
fields?
The fields and 89 Woodland under
89
agents.
Woodland, I know,
They want to be here?
Truax is coming.
And that might
Okay.
be a larger discussion anyway, so
Yes,
why
so
don't,
I
why
can
don't
show
we
you
not
the
do that one?
fields. So we had seen the plan for the fields a couple months ago, and at that point, the board did ask for a couple more items on the plan. One was, I reviewed the plan, one was the overlay of the change to the septic tank locations. That was the major part of the plan, change and a change to the wall itself. We don't want to hit the microphone, so I'm going to be very careful here. And I did ask that he darken the lines for the water and the sewer lines so we could see them. And so he has done that. I kind of put little blue markings in between just so you can compare the sewer to the water. That's all been done. The septic tanks, let me get myself oriented, I always have to do that, are here. Down is the leaching fields. These were changed and moved due to an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission. They wanted to see them further away from the wetland areas, so, but it was hard to figure out where the old ones were, and I actually drew it in, but I said it's up to you, to the engineer, Bruce Salick, to draw them in. So what he provided was, doing pretty good so far. Watch, I'll hit this
You're gonna
mic
jinx
off
it now.
before I know it.
Sorry.
So these were the old locations, and as noted, the Conservation Commission asked that they be moved up. So now the ability is available for viewing if anyone wanted to know the change on the septic tanks. The old septic tanks are here.
So it's
And that's,
going, are they going up in elevation?
Yeah, this
Yeah.
goes down to
Yeah, it's
elevation.
sloping.
Here's your
Yeah.
wetlands in here.
This 176, so 178, so. But it's further from,
Further from the
setbacks further,
wetlands.
so that seems like
That
a
was the-
positive change.
It is positive, but it was required. It would have probably not been changed if it wasn't required by the Conservation Commission.
Sometimes you just look at the end result though.
Yeah,
Do
understandable.
these tanks have seams, do we know?
They're supposed to be delivered, I can get that detail. I looked at it a long time ago, but
It'd be interesting to know, since it is so close to the wetlands, that if it's likely wet there and any leaks from the tank, just to know if
the
it's,
schematic, I don't know if it's on here, but it may have, if they're monolithic or not. Septic tank 2 compartment. But I don't, they don't
doesn't say
indicate
one
if
way
it's
or the other.
monolithic or not. It may not be based on the size. They may have to put seams in it.
Modular.
Yeah, that's for the
Oh,
wall.
it's all just a wall.
And the wall was changed in this area too. You got a landscape wall and the wall for the leaching field area, number 2, primary 2.
Just orientation wise, where is that?
Here's Washington Street
Oh, okay.
and the entrance.
Yeah, I saw the whole rock wall and
Yeah,
all of
this is the
that.
front wall here. They didn't show a front wall, but it's a decorative wall.
Yeah.
And they're gonna put another decorative wall here. This will be the wall for the retaining for the grades of the septic system. I can look deeper into the plans, Darrell, if you want to see if they want.
Yeah, you don't have to do it this second, but just to know, and
Based
maybe
on-
so Conservation Commission will know that,
I think just.
given
knowing
how
this-
large they
yeah,
are and the potential
it'd be good to
for
know that.
impact, yeah.
I think based on the sizes, I don't know if they construct these, they're so hard to move into, these are very large
Yeah,
tanks, so
so
to mold
like,
them in, they may not, I don't know if they're.
You know, you're right, the length of, how many, I don't know what the scale, is there anything where I could get
I think it's Mark's.
It's not me, and it's not you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Definitely not us.
Yeah, it does look like it would be hard to maybe
Yeah,
deliver it in
usually
one
the
piece.
larger ones,
Yeah,
you know,
okay, so,
So I recommend approval of these changes to the plan, the wall. He added the items I needed. And again, the changes were made due to the requirement from conservation to move them further away from the wetlands.
and without it becoming somehow our duty to ensure that it's watertight, but when you're out there inspecting, if you could at least notice if
Ensure
there's
those
anything
seams-
egregious.
In fact, I can ask that the engineer is certified to that as well.
Oh, oh, that'd be great.
They have to be watertight per the code,
Mhm.
but it's, be good to have it recognized by the engineer, the certification statement.
Okay, that's
so
a
I can
great idea.
Do that within the approval of it, the final approval.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. Okay, so, is this a name? Oh, okay, we could share the chairship.
I want no part of it.
You are vice chair.
Where's my thing?
Co-pilot.
Okay.
Get a vice chair?
Let's see.
I see.
6 minutes. All right, let's try,
We have, just so, Madam Chair, we have, is it a schedule, oh, it's a scheduled meeting, never mind. Both engineers are here now for 111 Woodland as well as 89 Woodland. It's ironic we're dealing with two properties not too far from each other.
okay, well, let's,
About the cancer incidents, we
Yeah, why
already
don't we talk,
talked
because
about.
we
Okay.
kind of
Yep.
started talking about it. I was pleased
yeah,
with our.
this one
our-
looked better than some past years.
We were commenting that, the overall rate is below expected, so that's great. And the only one that was statistically significantly elevated, although it's such a small sample size, everything looks
Right.
more skewed than it, is bladder and urinary cancer in men. But that's the fourth most common cancer in men, and it's very heavily weighted to people over 55 and Caucasian, of which we have an abundance. So the cohort is definitely kind of skewed to probably, this is an age-weighted incident rate. So I think that's, it looked good overall. And, yeah, I was happy. I was kind of surprised, Matt, though, that the prostate was like half of what they expected.
I think part of what gets hard to know is how much to interpret data in a town of 4,000 where you're like one person, like you kind of are coming in whole person increments. And it's just hard to know like how tight it is.
Yeah, that's true. But for many, we had zero,
Yeah.
zero incidents, so that was
That's good.
terrific.
Yeah.
And a lot of the ones that you would expect with high smoking rates, we didn't have, those were very low, so I was happy.
Since you mentioned smoking,
Oh, okay, yeah, I saw that too.
let's see, that was in the information, but it's not on
This.
our
Number 5, meeting revisions.
discussion. Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe I could start it. So that was another discussion that was over at the Dover Board of Health meeting, and Dr. Hartman was at their meeting, so I got a chance to speak to him a little bit on the side, too, about new information on mint menthol, because our regulations are for flavored, but more of the candy flavored, clearly targeting kids. But there is some information available that the mint and menthol has that same impact on making it more appealing to kids, and then leading to higher rates of use. So, question could be whether we want to consider amending our regulations to prohibit mint and/or menthol. A number of towns have been doing that recently, Needham being one. So anyway, we can discuss it further at another time, but I can't recall what information was sent along, but
And they're also looking at wintergreen, wintergreen, mint, and
Oh.
menthol.
okay.
Those were there was tobacco flavor, wintergreen, mint, and menthol, and those were the four flavors that originally, when they banned any fruity flavors from tobacco, extinguishable tobacco, they allowed those, the federal government. But now, as you just noted, Darrell, the U.S. Surgeon General came out way ahead of time because of the urgency of the issues about nicotine addiction. So I would recommend maybe to the board that you have a public discussion, invite your vendor or vendors who sell tobacco, and I'm sure you also see other people attending to discuss both sides of it, but it is a serious public health issue, in my view.
Yeah, I kind of feel like also with Rebecca not being here, this seems like something she'd probably weigh in on. So I think it's something worthy of definitely discussing.
And it would be a regulatory adjustment, so it would take more discussion,
Okay.
public hearing and all the rest, so. Okay, so we can look at that further. Again, there's more information available if you need it. The doctor who was at the Dover Board of Health meeting offered to come to speak with us, but I didn't think it was necessary for this meeting, and the information I thought was explanatory.
Interesting.
And
You will also find DJ Wilson from Mass Municipal Association. He's an attorney, as well as Attorney Cheryl Sabara. I was involved with another hearing for the same situation. They will be more than willing to come to your meeting to support the ban.
right, and Cheryl Sabara helped us, of MAHB, helped us with our regulations, which were the first ones to ban flavored, and a lot of cities and towns have joined on to that since then. But right, this just, since mint and menthol had been out there for so long, it wasn't necessarily on our radar, but there has been more research on it since then, so. Okay. So I guess we'll have that on, maybe not next meeting, because the next meeting is pretty packed, I gather, so.
Well, there's 4 hearings scheduled
For March 6th.
for March 6th.
If you guys need to do it on the 20th when I'm not here, that's okay. It's up to you.
I mean, I could put it on the agenda and
Yeah,
then you
put
can
it on, and
always
then if we
defer.
have, if we're
Okay.
running late, we'll move it then to the following meeting then. Okay, well, actually, we're, a few seconds, we are at 7:30, so we have an appointment about 111 Woodland Street for review of a building application
And an additional well.
and additional well. Thank you. Felt like I was missing the obvious.
Just so the board knows, Joe Marquardt from Marquardt Associates is here to review this request with the Board of Health. He has also been involved with review with me during the process.
Okay.
Evening, Joe Marquardt. I'm here on behalf of Daniel Nisi. He has a work commitment and is unable to make it tonight. Following up on a discussion the board had with Mr. Nisi back in July regarding a well at his home at 111 Woodland Street. We have put together a plan that I had hoped captured all the important elements from the discussions that night with the board and with some of the neighbors. We have added to the site plan the proposed barn location, which you may recall was up in the northeast corner and now is adjacent to the existing garage. we have moved the well a little closer to the home than the original location, further from some of the abutters who had some concerns about the impacts on their own wells. And we have done some research with regards to wells and septic systems in the area, and have established a 200-foot radius from the proposed well, and have not identified any wells or septic systems within that area. So we feel like we have kind of captured the gist of the discussions back in July. Recently, I went over to see the staff, Dr. Ellen and Mark, and there was concern raised about some of the wording in the notes regarding what should and should not be on the plan. And I think that's the thrust of tonight's discussion. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but it seemed to be that the discussion was wells and septics on the abutters, and Mark's contention is your comments meant an unlimited distance from the proposed well, well beyond the minimum requirement called for in your regulations. And in reading the notes, and I am late to the party, so to speak, all I can do is rely on what was in those notes, and I didn't see any mitigating factors that would say to us we need to chase wells no matter how far they are from the proposed well, or a septic system no matter what distance from our proposed well. So I guess I just wanted to get some clarity on those comments and see if the proposed plan, for the well replacement is sufficient.
Can I just ask one clarifying question? So at the time, I would say kind of watching the building go up, that was certainly not very emphasized. I think Mr. Nisi described the well as being used primarily as supplemental water to support the agriculture. So my assumption is that is not tying into the addition or the new barn or anything related to it, or has that changed?
I believe it's still to have the ability to use the well for irrigation and be ready for the potential failure of his existing well.
Okay.
It's going to meet drinking water standards, will be connected to those facilities to do the irrigation, and then switch later should the need arise.
Okay.
I think, Matt, though, at the time we had that discussion, that building was being construed as an unheated barn with no water.
That was distinct from the house.
Right, and now it seems like things have changed, and it's certainly a lot larger, I think, than we had understood. So I think.
And I don't mean to say larger than described, but certainly my mental image wasn't a structure that was that
Right.
size.
So-
And so I just want to kind of understand the well in the context of right now.
So I think the big thing for me is, this is separate from the well, is if you are adding heat to the second floor, is that now a bedroom, and does that bring in septic issues? So that's my other
Right.
set of questions.
So, and that's going to be the second part of our review,
Yeah.
Joe. I know you're here for the well, but I put the plan out as it relates to the well. Just so the board knows, back in August, when you reviewed this, I think it was the second time you met in May as well of this past year, the actual motion of the board was that all the abutting lots, that the existing septic system and wells be shown on the
Right.
plan.
Yeah.
The engineer has shown the wells, but as you can see, those septics are not shown. But look at the upper left-hand corner. Note number 5 says there are no potable water wells evident within 200 feet. Note number 6, there are no soil absorption systems within 200 feet of the proposed well. So
That's the new.
I feel it's
That's the proposed location.
I feel it's satisfactory, but I would be going against the motion of the board, so that's why it was brought back to the board. I had the authority to approve it, but the engineer, the designer was not able to show the septics on each lot, but was able to put a definitive statement.
Okay.
Okay, and it's signed, okay.
It was
So-
signed by Joe, I believe.
Right, and as you noted, our regulations don't prohibit this, but we're not happy about additional wells and the concept of additional wells leading to somehow a resource that is otherwise not used, as opposed to the groundwater is shared by everyone in the area. And was it really necessary to have an additional well that could lead to excessive water use? So that was our concern. And then the plans as presented previously just didn't have enough technical detail for us to know whether it was in compliance with other requirements.
And the presence of the pool as well, and just, I think it wasn't articulated very clearly to us exactly why this second well was necessary, because at the same time, we were being told that the well that was present was sufficient, but it might fail in the future. So we were kind of getting a little bit of a mixed message, I think, about why is this well necessary? Should they just install a new well that's adequate for all their needs and then just have one well? So I think that was our question.
So as I look at this, it now describes the situation better. As noted, there's a secondary issue of this project is different than the small barn tucked in the corner. That was what we'd
Yeah,
assumed.
I do have
So
the
we-
plans for that, Joe.
Oh,
I don't know
excellent.
if he...
You have floor
if you
plans for
were-
that?
If you're representing him on the building application, but if not, I do have information to show the board after
Okay, so we
the
could do
well
something
section's done.
conditional to,
Yes, I separated them, but they're both the same address, that's why they're both items are on the same
Okay.
agenda item.
And in terms of, so it sounds like from a setback standpoint, the board is satisfied with the 200 feet assertion. And then I think that the well seems like it's functioning a different way than what I'd imagined, but it doesn't seem like I think I have lots of questions about the structure and finished space in that structure, but that seems like in many ways it's independent of the well.
It is independent of the well.
Okay.
And
I
present-
agree with that.
And just presently too, the well's shown without a water line because it's being proposed as an irrigation well.
And if in the future water line was desired, would that need to come before a board with
Yes.
Which,
Yeah.
would that go to us, or would it go to the building
Well,
inspector?
it needs to go to us because any modification to a septic plan would require to show the water line.
Oh,
But if they decide to put a water line to the house,
Yeah,
we would need to make sure it doesn't interfere with the septic.
I see. Okay.
They show the septic, but still, it's required to show the water line to us.
so, excuse me, Joseph, when you were referring to connecting the well to the facilities or infrastructure earlier, do you mean in the future, but it's not planned presently?
However, they're going to take advantage of that well for irrigation purposes, is what I meant. So if they need to make a connection into a pump or into their control box for the irrigation heads, those sorts of things.
So then that would
that'll
need to
take
be
place
shown.
wherever
That
that
will-
exists.
We will need to see that, because if they think they can just tie, if the pumps are in the basement or the existing, however they're watering, if they're planning to tie in, then the issue of having two wells serving the one house, there will need to be more review and provisions for that. So,
So presently, you don't...
cross-connection issues and that kind of thing, so.
Presently, Joe, you don't show a water line because it's an irrigation well.
Right.
You can obviously dig a line for the electrical conduit, but if it indeed starts to need water lines to go to another location outside of this location, then that would need to come in front of the board, just so they know where
Because
those...
my point is, I'm unaware of where the control for the irrigation would be.
That's
I
fine.
don't want to misspeak and say that there will be no line
Right.
to the garage, for instance. And that is the point, the control center for the irrigation, and we need to make a connection to that in order for this irrigation well to run properly.
Okay, so I think what we want you to understand is that if we approve this, it is not also approving any connections. You will need, or they will need to come back with the plan for what those connections are going to look
You want
like,
to
so
see
that
where
it can be
you
reviewed.
want to see
Yes.
the plumbing.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, the water line outside. And know where know one where the water line's being directed, show it on the plan, and two, what the purpose of that water line is. Is it going to a control panel, as you said, or is it going into a duplicate, mixing in with the other well water in the house?
So I would say not just outside, but wherever it's going to go.
Yeah, yeah,
So to
exactly.
simplify that process, as I explained it to Dan in 15 minutes, is that something the agent can handle, or is it coming back to the board?
I believe if it,
It's up to the board.
ordinarily, you would review that and bring it in for
Correct.
final approval, but you would be able to review it for compliance.
Yeah, I could review it ahead of time, bring it to the board for confirmation.
Signed.
But if he's anxious to drill this well right now and do the quality and quantity tests that are required per our well regulations, I would recommend approval of this well as shown for what it's meant to be, an irrigation well at that spot. If it's going to be directed to other locations, then a new
Come
plan
back
will be
with
needed.
the details.
Maybe the
and-
as-built could have the water line shown, its connections, and I'll bring it back to the board.
Okay. I don't know if I want to wait for for it to all be done and then see,
Yeah.
right? Because if it
No,
is.
I thought he meant as-built for the well, like if
Yeah,
you
just for
drill
the
the well.
location of the well, make sure it's in the
Oh,
right
and then at
location.
that time, add those other,
Right,
I see
right,
what you
right.
mean. Okay,
Right?
great.
Yes.
Okay.
You are in my mind,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, no, he didn't mean like the lines being built, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
no,
all
no
right.
lines until the board sees it and approves it.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay, great.
This way they can get going on the well.
Right, exactly, get
Irrigation.
the, yeah, start the
Okay.
process, right.
All right, so step one is we can approve the plan. Any
Can I
conditions
can I
that
just,
we would
can I
do?
just
Oh,
make one
yes.
comment back to the
Absolutely.
sharing, though?
Yep.
So just looking at 17.6, it says wells used for drinking water and domestic water supply shall not be used to provide water for groundwater heat pump systems,
Right.
water cooling, or irrigation.
Irrigation
And so if
wells.
we're saying we're putting this well in for irrigation and then we're mixing in the house,
Well, I think the board's going to have a discussion on that if that's the case.
but so I think that would be the guidance, is that, like, that's I think the key reg to kind of help him understand that,
Yes.
right?
Can't mix and match.
Yes.
Yep.
So it could go into the house to be kind of processed through, but if, like, you wouldn't expect it to fill the same pressure tank that you're then saying, okay, this goes out the hose, this goes to the kitchen.
And
Right?
as time goes on, I know that's part of the regulation
Yes,
review.
we have a
Yeah.
We
discussion.
may want to define irrigation,
More
both
specific.
domestic
Right.
versus farm purpose.
Yeah, I had a comment on
Agricultural.
that.
Okay,
in
sounds
my
I didn't
edits.
see your comment. Yep,
Yeah.
that was mine too.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so, again, so any conditions if we make a motion?
I don't see any conditions outside of it being approved as an irrigation well.
Okay, and that no lines can
For
be
well
installed
installation,
until
yeah.
That,
additional plans come in. So do we have a motion to approve the plans
so moved.
with those?
Second.
caveats? Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
now, the second part of the agenda. Joe, I don't know if you're here to help represent the applicant on his building application, but that's what we're going to be reviewing now.
Yeah, he had not mentioned it, but I'll certainly listen in if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Public meeting. You can come up and look if you want.
so I think
Okay,
this
I'll
is.
grab these and get these signed afterwards. Okay. Right spot here. So the applicant has come in also to request, the barn that has been approved without any plumbing
Or heating.
or heating, that's right, 'cause it's coming in for that request.
Right.
To request heating. He was in here, actually, Joe was part of the conversation because he was here for the well, but we were discussing the room with the builder, Gary McLaughlin. The builder was here.
Didn't he just submit the plans?
These
I
were
mean,
some-
like the.
131.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it's not like this is an existing
130-19.
structure, it's like, why are you coming?
Well, he
Yeah.
came in prior for the barn alone, and I did approve that for,
Right, but I think like the idea of like, I haven't even built the structure yet, and now I want something different for it than the initial plans I submitted is confusing to me.
the barn's up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know, I
But
drive past it every
He
day.
put it up with the permit that was approved
Right.
back in November. But when he came in to see us just recently, last Monday, a week ago Monday, I believe it was, he has decided that with the space up above, he would like to make it a golf simulator game room. And his son was with him, so, he said it's for my son. And I just found it interesting that I said, wow.
But the
what
initial
to do.
application was 2 months ago.
Yeah, it's to amend the building permit, number 6156 at 111 Woodland, from a unheated two-car garage barn to a two-car garage barn with heated room above garage. So here's the lower section. And just so you know, here's the garage. There's the actual garage to the house, and I can show you from the other plan if you'd like.
Yeah.
So the barn is separate from the house, so there's no connection to the second floor of the house or even to the garage. And so, but this is an entrance in the side, and this is the entrance to the barn from the, when you come down the driveway. And this is the second floor over the barn, and he wishes to heat this. He
I see
has
no
no plumbing
bath-
shown,
okay,
no
good.
plumbing.
Yeah.
But I still want to show it to you, because it's
To
a
me,
large
it's very
area.
clearly a room, and it
Yep.
needs to be included in the room count. So
Okay,
that
so
means
So
then
that's
we
what,
need to
that's what I was thinking of.
understand.
So what's a septic?
So the room count right now says 4 bedrooms, 9 rooms, which is the max. But I want you to look at the building plans, if you don't mind. Especially, the second floor is easy, so we'll go to second floor first. Second floor is 1, 2, and 3. And this is all storage back here.
But it says
Playroom.
Playroom.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I read storage, and I didn't even go
Yeah.
further
That's
down.
4.
But
Is-
it's not connected to
No,
these,
but it's
so
connected to
it's
this.
still a room.
But it's
So
that,
it's
so
a
they
room.
don't- yeah,
Okay.
So
there's-
3 bedrooms.
And then you're gonna see the 4th bedroom on, and so, but 4 rooms up there. And here's the 4th
And
bedroom.
can we just articulate why that's a room but not a bedroom, given it's on the second floor?
Entrances without going through the second floor. It's, let's see if it's through the kitchen.
Is this a separate stairwell?
That's what I'm gonna check for right now. Yeah, it's
Looks
through,
like a separate.
through a breezeway mudroom on the first floor.
So it's less about this particular property, but just to make sure we're consistent, is sort of what I'm struggling with a little bit.
And that's over the garage, but you can get to that from the mudroom breezeway in the existing house. And we've seen this actually Curve Street. I always remember Curve Street was our first review of a room. That's not,
And this is so similar to that craft, right, like that's the craft room that was on Bullard Street where we sort of said,
Yeah.
this is a room but not a bedroom because it's so parsed out. It seems like,
Kitchen and family room.
so it depends on how the board wants to call this space.
How
Oh,
large is that
it's pretty
space?
nine.
Yeah, and-
So that would, so that would bring the room count to 10.
Yes,
well, if you count this as 2,
yes.
you know, in most cases.
That's how we
That's
count
how they labeled it.
everything like that.
In most
Okay.
cases, that should have been labeled kitchen.
Then divide by 2,
like,
that's
well, I guess the
5.
question is, we sort of had this also on Bullard Street where there was that great room, but I think that was like 900 square feet. I mean, that was some large
But they
room.
had, it was by function, so they had like an eating area,
I-
and then they had the playroom area.
To be honest with you,
This
these are the
is
old
dining and
plans.
living,
Yeah, this
so
is the dining room.
that's almost 2,
Yeah,
depending.
and then they have the garage, and I'm reading upside down, but I don't know if there's a divider here, but this is all part of
But
one
again,
room,
I'd
but
say like
showing
if
2
this is like the
functions.
island extending here, like it's hard to argue, like,
I agree.
you know, for me,
Yes.
that feels less obvious that that is 2 rooms than
The
1
assessor
room.
looked at it as 1, because the assessor
The assessor
said
did
it's
it.
a 4-bedroom,
Okay.
9 rooms. So the assessor counted 9 rooms, and
Well,
I
so
actually,
what's the 9th room? So
Well,
here's a study.
1 kitchen area.
One,
So we counted 4 upstairs.
Two.
Living, 2,
3.
3, 4, and then 4 upstairs, so maybe they did count this as 2, because the assessor said 9.
Is this heated, do we know?
I don't know.
It says
open.
open, but
Have you been in a house, Joe, at all?
Just briefly.
Well,
yes.
what's this?
Front door of the
Garage.
Both of these are
Yeah.
garage?
Oh, yeah, that's around the side there.
So what's this?
Is
Oh,
that the
that's not-
outside?
is this just a
That's
porch or
Yeah,
something,
yeah, I
or
think
is
that's
this
a
a
big
main
porch.
entry?
They've got that
Walking
kind of
up
grand
the
entrance.
stairs, here's your outside
Right,
doors.
doors here, that's just a step.
Okay. And this wouldn't be a room,
No.
because this
That's
is a
a
mud
mudroom,
room,
yeah.
so.
They
if
must have
this is-
counted that as 2,
it's-
because they said 9.
This is a beam.
Ellen and I were having this discussion too. I don't count 9, but the assessor did.
right, I think because, you know, we have 2 that are
Kinda-
sort of dual, I mean, they are listed as that.
Yeah.
But I guess it's a question if somebody didn't list them as that.
Right.
Like, we wouldn't, like, I feel like, I think we have to figure
Let
out,
me
like,
just see.
listing there doesn't, that says that's how that person used it, not necessarily how
And
this.
the board has always said, we'll use the assessor's information as a guide,
But not a
but it's
definitive.
up to the board to make the final decision. Either way, you know, Because we're gonna run into this with another house that I'll be showing to you at the next meeting.
So what would you describe as,
We're looking, just so you know, we're looking at the house across the street from you.
You have to
Yeah,
recuse.
so
You have to go on that
I've
side.
got you as
you might want to suggest
Right.
that
Yes.
Rebecca's abstaining. She didn't know.
yeah.
I just walked up.
So for the record,
Yeah,
second.
so I know, I mean,
So I guess,
so is this septic
she's
four
noted
bedroom?
it.
Yeah, I've got,
She abstained, okay.
She already
I'm
noted it.
recused.
What's the septic design?
Septic design, I'd have to pull that, do I have that?
It's
5?
5? Oh, okay, well then,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, if it's 5, then
Then
we're
we don't
done.
even need to have a conversation.
Is it 5?
But let's
I
just
don't know.
double check, just because if that's it.
You mentioned that Monday when we met in your office.
I'd have to go pull that plan, I don't have
Let's
that.
just pull it just so we know, because if,
Yeah.
Because if it's 5, I'm,
I would still, what I would say is if it's 5, I'd still count how we count to say,
no, but then there's not necessarily
And
a
that's what I-
controversy,
right.
so.
But I think but you'd want to settle on the room count. So you'd sort of say, are we calling it 8 based on how we're counting tonight, or are we counting it 9? If we're
Based on
counting
how
at
the
9, then you're like,
assessors-
you're now at 10.
No, it's
you-
either not 8, 9, 10, 11, you know,
Yeah.
there are a lot of ways. I almost don't want to pin it down now,
Okay.
if it's
But
not
if the
necessary.
max is 10, and we divide by 2 and it's 5, and they have a septic approved for 5,
Okay.
then they're okay.
Right, but
So-
I just know that, I think one of the parts that has felt hard for the board is if you sort of say, I added 1 bedroom, so now I'm
Continuity,
10.
yeah.
When it's just to say like, there's a sort of implicit, how are you counting it? I just don't know if it makes sense to say, here's how we're counting it today for this decision, so that we don't kind of come back later to say, we added a bedroom and you had a 5-bedroom system, and, you know what I mean, like,
Yeah, no, I mean,
because I struggle some with the kind of great room structures about at what point does one room
Right.
become 2 rooms? How great does a great room have to be? And, you know, is it the pattern of use versus the sort of sheer physical magnitude when people are like,
Right.
no, this is the 800 square foot living room?
And some are clearer than others.
Yeah.
For example,
This one
when
is
they
tough
can,
because it's
when they
very-
have a table,
How can I forget? 22 years ago, I approved it for a 5-bedroom once it was.
all right.
1997. Compliance was issued.
Perfect,
12/22/1997.
perfect. So we'd say it counts for the room count, and we
Okay.
don't think it counts as a bedroom, similar to why the art room for Bullard Street, the other room here, is because it's not connected to the house.
It doesn't count as a bedroom, it counts as a room.
It
and
counts as
we'd
a
have
room.
to have it conditional to no bathroom and be
Right.
added
No- no-
to that.
No plumbing.
And does it also need to not
Plumbing or
connect to,
bath.
like, right now, the structure doesn't connect to the house, right?
I don't think it
Connects to the
matters, because
second-
it's,
Why
if
would it
it's not
matter?
connecting
Well,
to
if
the
you-
other.
No, if you connect to the
Connects to the
house and
second-
you've got conditioned space, like, if that's like, now, here's the barn that's got conditioned space, and I can pass through finished space from the main house, it's less clear to me that it doesn't count as a bedroom anymore.
But either way, like, but
No, no,
still.
but,
it
no, so I'm
passes.
not saying it doesn't pass muster, but you're saying, if we're saying it counts for a room count, for it is a room, then you say you now have either 9 or 10 rooms, you could do another additional room onto the structure and still hit your 5-bedroom room count, if
But
we're
as long
saying.
as it's no more than, if he ever did connect the second floor of the house to the barn, he'd have to go through the garage,
Yeah.
but he could, because the playroom and it, you know,
Right.
be above ground.
But so I think like, it's
But
not
wouldn't that
that,
require a
It
building
would.
permit
Right.
anyway? So we have that safety.
okay,
Yeah, there
We
is a
don't have to,
safety.
yeah, I don't.
we don't have to comment on it.
Also, it works much like the current upstairs playroom is, which is connected to the house.
Yeah.
But it's not connected to all the other bedrooms on the second floor, so it doesn't really act like a
No,
second
those-
floor in the
yeah.
same way,
But the second floor of the place is finished, right?
Yes.
And so you could, so
As
again, but
is
again,
that.
they're not proposing it, I think it's, and so it's fine to
exactly.
say,
The control
we're
is the
saying,
building.
but I
Right,
think the
maybe.
rationale for why it's not a room is if they came back and said, okay, now we're connecting these finished space, now we want to do this part, this is a perfect one for the in-law suite or the au pair suite. That would
Exactly.
not,
Yeah.
or that would be approved, but there would be no possibility for further expansion, because they now would have hit their bedroom tower.
But no one's saying that's not a room. I think we're all agreeing it's a room.
No, I think we all agree it's room. I'm just thinking, like, we have this plan 2 months from now, if we get a new plan 2 months from now, I think having some clarity to the applicant to say, these are the key features that help us think about it this way, because I don't know what the long-term vision of the structure is, given that we've seen, like, a natural evolution in the project over a fairly short time course.
Right, and if they connected this new golf playroom with the current playroom on that floor and added a, now it's starting to look like a
A room.
second floor of.
Right, apartment,
of-
right.
A second floor of bedrooms, so
Yeah.
that would, to me, would also
Proposed
crack
conditional to no
open.
plumbing,
And not tying into the main house.
connected to.
Okay.
Hey, I just didn't know if we actually needed that second
You
condition.
don't, but
I-
at least it's
I think-
motion, so.
Yeah.
So someone in the future knows that.
I'm just saying though, that like,
there are
that
issues.
would mean that anytime someone's building a separate, like a pool house or then we'd have to assert that same condition. I'm just saying,
Right.
once we set a precedent, we gotta
But I
stick
also
with
think
it.
it's like, the pool house is, like, is that, to the main house?
Could be.
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
we just
I
need
don't-
to
I
be
don't- I don't feel- I
cognizant
don't feel
of
s-
precedent setting.
I
That's
don't
all.
feel strongly, like, could we record it in the minutes to kind of reflect it for clarity of future boards if they were faced with a choice about the property that they give the current board, but not have it as part of the actual formal decision? Because I think your point's
The
a fair
decision
one.
was based
Yeah.
on the fact it's not connected.
Although we should
Right.
try to remember to always say that for every,
Right.
start connecting then.
It's saying unique conditions, you are, this is, I would never expect a whole second floor of the barn being heated, but we just saw it down at a different property.
But I think it's also important to be sort of consistent with that property, because that, like, for the South Main Street one, right?
Yeah,
Like, that's
we
like
just saw
a
that.
separate building, we said, you take out the garbage grinder, you're doing other pieces, so. Okay.
All right,
Okay.
so,
Well, phew, that, it's 5-bedroom septic, so.
yeah.
That makes
made-
everything
That
a
made
little
life
easier.
easier, all right,
I did
so,
pull the line, just forgot.
Perfect.
See too many of these.
so do we have a motion to approve I want to make one more comment for a motion. And I assume that the building inspector is going to be doing this. I just know that we considered the issue when we were doing our garage, but we have an unfinished space above. When you're finishing space, I see that they're having a door at the bottom of the stairs that lead up to what's above the garage. But there are all sorts of provisions that folks have to do to keep any of the
Exhaust gases.
vehicle exhaust, exactly, from going up into the space.
I
So
think
it
I saw
requires,
carbon
like, a lot of-
monoxide and there was a whole fire protection plan piece on that.
That'll be
Yeah,
building
it's,
inspector.
Smoke detector, smoke and CO, fire extinguisher,
yeah,
heat
I mean, those are
detector.
kind of standard, but it's actual barriers have to be put in,
I
again,
see.
more of a building inspector thing, but it is a very specific health kind of a thing, so
Probably why
just,
they have, coming off the outside for the stairwell versus inside.
yeah, except there's an inside door, so how
Has to
good
be
is that seal?
Yeah.
I just know that it is an issue. So I don't know if you ever see the building inspector.
Yeah, I see them usually twice a week now, maybe more, sometimes
I mean,
3 times a week.
Again, not our
I'm just
jurisdiction,
asking.
but
And the fire
just to make
department has
sure.
not signed off yet.
Or just so we know that
They
that's
have
a
to sign off.
standard review, and it's not a fire issue, it's a,
Usually he'll put, the fire
Poison
chief will
yourself
put
issue.
smoke detector, so he'll actually initial the smoke detectors on the
yeah, and the
plan.
CO will help
Yep.
with that, so.
Yep. Oh, yeah, that's more important, the CO.
Although you don't want to have it happen and then have to run out versus prevent it from being able to get into the space. So, anyway, okay, so do we have a motion to approve the building plan?
For a heated space above the new.
Yeah, for a
above
heated
the-
space without any plumbing.
So
Do we
moved.
need to specify
Second.
anything
Sounds
further than
reasonable.
that? Okay, any other comments, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Because that's how the bond was originally approved, without any plumbing. Just
Right.
All right.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Do we have people waiting for anything in particular?
89 Woodland, the engineer's here, Rob's.
Perfect.
correct.
And it's not totally clear whether I'm in the buffer or not, so I need to,
Oh,
or for 89 Woodland. Like, I think I'm out of the buffer, but I'm not sure I'm out of the, out of the, about it.
Do you know who your
Rebecca
abutters
can
are
come back,
from?
right?
300-foot
Rebecca.
Yeah.
distance?
Wherever she is.
Oh, so
like-
you're definitely recusing yourself, or you're questioning whether?
I mean, I'm
She
sure
was
if
on
I
Mill,
recused
beginning
myself
of
last
Mill.
time, so my 2 cents would be I should recuse myself this time, although I'm not actually sure
Where did
that I
Rebecca
have
go?
to, but I'd rather err on the side of recusing.
Okay, okay.
She recused herself.
Well, maybe she
I know,
feels she's
but
too
does she
close to
know?
this one, too.
No, she's not.
good for
She's
this
nowhere
one.
near,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
This
This
is
is
just
way
like
down
it's
the
in the
street.
cross street angle.
Yeah.
Okay, it would be, well, I guess we can
Still have a quorum.
proceed. Yeah, okay.
I can let Rebecca.
So who wants to start? Do you want
Well,
to
the,
present and
Yeah, I can show the board what we have.
weigh in on comments?
And we can go from there. And then Rob's here to go over the plan. We have a septic plan that was submitted for a cabana, proposed cabana. And the plan concepts were reviewed with the state, Claire Golden of DEP, as well as, I reviewed the plan as well. And there's some questions on, and you'll see my big question mark here, on why the design is for 3 bedrooms versus first statements that, and I'm reading from a phone call that Ellen recorded back on December 20th, that it's a unique use that is being proposed. Let me show you the proposal, but the soil tests were done, they were complete, they're on file, so there's no issues there. And I'm just gonna move this one down, because I left some notes on it. But there wasn't anything major outside of a couple minor things that would have to be done to it, requiring perks inch by inch, a waiver for the distance, and let me show you that. This is more for discussion, I'm not presenting for approval, but the building pipe is 61 feet from the structure to the tank, so that would need a waiver as well. But the main reason I'm discussing this with the board tonight, and Rob's here to add in and listen in, is that a couple questions came up from the state, and we do have the 2 Title V inspections. This is a conventional system, and out back, and I need for you in, Rob, just so you know, before we go too far, this existing well, the Title V inspector says it's 100 feet from the system, so you two need to coordinate and tell me for sure what's going on here, because it's not 100 feet on this plan. But that's for another part of this, and then there's a cesspool out back that handles a half bath and a shower, I believe it said in the Title V.
Or laundry?
Laundry.
Yeah, I thought there was a laundry,
Laundry.
yeah.
It was in the second Title V that we just got Monday, but it was in the other one too. So with that said, this is conventional, so back to where I was going with number one.
Conventional, but still with a cesspool somehow is
Cesspool
up.
with 2 leaching lines off
Yep.
it, so the state.
Not currently
It has
conventional,
a
but
septic tank, it has a septic tank, a concrete septic tank with Ts. That's what they did to repair cesspools in the old days when they were failing. They either put a line off it because it sealed itself, it became non-porous. I'm saying this right now because it will be part of our review as well, and how do we handle that situation? Because the state basically is saying that this is a quote-unquote, it might be an antiquated conventional system, but it is a conventional. So, and that's why Claire was indicating, Claire Golden from the state, that why don't they just pump up and connect to the conventional system, not the cesspool, but the conventional, or design for 1 bedroom, and you can, the board can grant waivers for 1 bed, you can grant them for 2, but you can go down to 1 if you so wish. And then, that was pretty much her questions, you know, why not put an ejector pump here and pump up to the conventional? You know, the 1 bedroom, and then I circled this, unless it's if it was an in-law, you could do a 1 bedroom as well, so that's why 1 bedrooms can be considered for if they want to design 1 bedroom, but they are utilizing an area they tested back in 2000, this was done a while ago, with Paul Saunier, 2007, so about 12 years ago. So that's it. I'm showing it just for review and to review the comments from DEP.
So, Mark, I got a question. I seem to remember when we looked at it last time, we wondered why there's no water line going to this structure.
Good, there has to be if they're gonna have
Well, it's
storage.
supposed to have a, yeah, where's the
And-
water source for this
That's
thing?
another thing that would need to be shown on the plan, Mark, just so you know, is the water line.
and generally what's in there, such
other
as,
drawing
is
shows
there a
that.
bedroom or 2, or is it strictly a pool house?
Yeah, we do have,
Oh, we do have something? Oh, excellent.
I think,
Yeah, we have something in our packet.
Oh. In the,
This?
In the new newest
No,
one?
that's
Yeah, I
the,
think it's on-
this-
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
It might be attached to the back.
Oh, here it is,
Yeah.
here it is, this.
so good.
That's that
It's
is
like a
this.
living room.
Correct.
Yeah. It's got a living room,
Kitchen.
a fireplace, a kitchen, a half bath, a laundry. Yeah. Mudroom.
So is this a bedroom, that, I
Yeah,
mean?
that's the structure.
Why am I not finding
Hmm?
this?
It-
no
it's-
bedroom.
It should be.
So what's this, a
maybe
living
about
room?
Living room, like,
Keep going, keep going.
But wouldn't we have to call that a bedroom?
Well,
Stop.
Okay.
we never ran into a cabana looking this fancy.
Yeah.
Well, because it has a laundry, a bath, a mudroom, a living room, a kitchen.
Sides of my house.
So I mean, it's
Looking
pretty
more
much
an
like a,
in-law, to be honest with
right.
you. Which if
Because it could be
is-
used as that.
Which if it is, they can design possibly a one-bedroom for him,
So it's a second dwelling on the property.
more or less.
I don't think, is it heated? Is it going to be used in the winter?
It's got a kitchen, so it's going to be heated.
You'll have to heat it to keep the pipes from freezing.
Yeah.
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 But it's, I mean, the
It has a
question is,
wood-burning fireplace.
We're trying, we're doing a
Laundry.
design for it, separate system for it, and it's a three-bedroom design.
All right, so there are a few things
Correct.
I'm not keen on. I mean, although this is, yes, a surprise. Sorry, this was here when we arrived tonight, and I came late, so I didn't see this yet. For seasonal use, and Cape Cod's a classic for this, that systems that are used seasonally don't treat as well as ones that are used continuously. So hence, my preference would be to see this connected to the existing system. And second, not be oversized, although the question of being oversized, because this looks like a house, not like a pool house, starts to get complicated, so.
And also, I mean, so would this be considered like a multi-dwelling property? And
Well, and that's where the zoning might come in, and then if
Yeah.
so, if the building inspector believes that could be an in-law, then it's back to zoning.
This does not look like a pool house to me.
The other note that I did not note to the board, I'm thoroughly making sure I let you know, is Claire did say that the Board of Health has within your jurisdiction, if they so wish to design a septic system, that it may be the time for the house to put one in, because you can declare this, because you question
Failed.
conventional, it is an antique conventional, and you can declare it failed. And I know there's going to be potential discussion on cesspools, even if they're part of a septic tank or have lines off them. So, you know, that's the board's right to do that. As she noted, the board has the ability to declare that a system is failing to protect the public health and environment despite passing passing Title V. So. And that anyone may not be happy, but they can go to the courts if that's the wish of the board. You know, again, we are, just so you know, Rob, we're in the process of discussing cesspools through this process. It wasn't planned around it, it just happened.
Right.
It was
We've been-
discussed prior to this evening coming in.
Yeah.
Is
In other
there-
towns, there are plenty of towns who don't permit cesspools to be used at all any longer, and so we're looking at
Correct.
phasing them out, finding a way to phase them out. So,
There are towns that have a bylaw that if you have a cesspool, you automatically fail Title V.
Right.
exactly, and
We're
that's
in the
what
That's what
we're
we're looking
heading
at.
towards. So-
contemplating that.
Oh, I get that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
part of it is, I don't know what the rest of the property looks like in terms of appropriateness for septic, but that house is going to be facing that issue if we complete our regulatory
Has your
updates.
client indicated that he may be willing to do it all at once?
He has not indicated that at all.
Is it the appropriate time, you know?
Yeah.
Putting a few more lines on this and maybe one bedroom and whatever, how many bedrooms?
I don't know.
But, you know, why do it twice?
A lot.
Right.
He has not, he's not asked to do that.
Oh, okay.
He's just concerned with the pool house.
And we're concerned about the long-term viability of this, and if this is here, what's going to happen with that in the future? So,
I mean, obviously,
this is
if
the
the pump
best.
fails, you gotta fix it. He has to, he has 7 acres of land almost there, so,
He has plenty of area.
he has plenty of area.
Assuming it has appropriate conditions for a septic.
I don't know why the
I don't know
engineer
that.
chose to go down the back. I don't know if Paul Sonia
Well,
explored
I
the
can tell,
problem.
this property was 2 lots, if you remember,
Oh, okay.
and they were preserved.
I don't remember that, but.
Okay, so at one time they did an A&R plan, and this property was 2 lots, and this house had a lot that came all the way down in here, and then came up and there was frontage, and this was the second lot that went like that. So these were 2 lots, these folks took the lot line out, we actually did a plan and recorded it, taking the lot line out.
So now there's a deed for a single property, it's
Now
not,
it's combined as one property.
it's one parcel.
Right.
Okay.
And they needed to do that in order to build the pool house or do anything they wanted to do all in conjunction with the house,
Mhm.
or per the building code.
And they have one well,
They have one well, as far
And-
as I know.
and that's going to be adequate to supply all of this?
Correct.
Yeah, but
The
you're
issue-
talking about adding laundry, bathroom, pool, that's a lot more water demand.
Well, you're probably doing the same amount of laundry, just doing it there versus in the house. Same amount of people are gonna be here that are there, whether they're in the pool house washing or in the house washing.
No, but when you
Yeah.
pull out, you have guests and you can give them
They're gonna have
towels
those
and.
guests regardless of whether the laundry's there.
No,
though.
I'm just wondering if they've ever had any questions
I
about
haven't-
water
There's
supply.
no indication of that from anyone that has said that. And Mark, this was taken from the A&R plan.
Yeah, just so you
I don't
know.
know what it
Let me
is.
show you what Harry showed.
You said you showed 100 feet?
Yeah.
That's only like 100 feet.
No, it's not, I already measured.
It's like, what,
It's if you
40?
guys-
75
So
probably.
the well front system is exactly 100 feet. That's what Harry wrote. So here's that front system.
Where'd you say 184 feet?
This is the well. That's 84
Oh.
to the point, the corner of the house. So
Oh, so maybe that-
you
okay.
two need to sit down and go check.
That doesn't look like it was shown properly on the old
Okay,
plan.
so then Harry may be correct and you
Right.
need to.
And I took that off an old plan, so he's probably got more, he dug it out.
I'll let you two try.
Well,
So, does this need, as an accessory unit, which is what it looks like to me, potentially, should this be approved first by ZBA?
I would
Before
recommend it be
we,
passed by the building commissioner
Go to the
first.
building.
He'll make that decision if it needs to go to ZBA to make sure if he does consider it an accessory unit, then it would have to be reviewed to make sure it meets all their requirements. at the zoning
Okay.
board. So I think it is advisable that at least get that through our building commissioner for review.
and then, I guess, in terms of being able to approve this, we need water lines on here,
Yeah,
do we
there's a
not?
few things,
We're really not looking for the
So-
approval tonight, I think Mark's
getting
concerned with
The sense of,
whether we can even do the 3-bedroom design for the pool house. That's where we're at. I mean, if
Well-
I can't do the 3-bedroom design, you're not gonna approve it, showing you the water line's not gonna help
right,
anything.
right.
So,
To be honest
That's-
with you, Rob, I would suggest with
Yeah.
Claire's first suggestion, is if you're not updating anything more than just building this, is to pump up to the antiquated conventional septic system until the day comes where you may need to update both. You know, 'cause it's,
But we
there
would
is
have to do the
quite a
room
bit of-
count to
yeah.
see if they can even accommodate
Yeah, now that's.
another bedroom and plus 2 other rooms.
But that was the, unless this is
Yeah.
truly not gonna be a pool cabana, then that's a whole different world. A pool cabana, you come from the house down, take a swim, hang out in the living room, whatever. But with the kitchen and everything, I have that major unless. Because
Yeah.
the unless is that looks like someone could live there through the summer.
I think
you know.
I could. Looks pretty nice.
Especially full kitchen, laundry, I mean.
Yeah.
It's got 5 changing rooms in it, okay? It's got a kitchen that's 18 feet long, 12 feet.
That's
wide.
why-
It's a pretty big structure.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't know if an ejector pump for a classified pool cabana, I believe it would work, but this seems to go beyond a class of, your typical, I'll put it that way, your typical pool cabana. It's more of a accessory unit.
then we even push the argument more to put in a system for it.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
which that's what
that would
has
be,
the right to decide if that should be repaired at the same time.
my preference would be to see an improved system because the wording in Dover, hold on,
And that
is,
would be good to do it all at once. So get it done,
Let's see.
unless if they're gonna divide it. If they are, then
I think they want to
obviously.
be able to preserve that right someday.
Oh, so see, that's.
See, that's,
why-
yeah, that's what, that's
Now
what,
the- Okay.
And they
That's
wanna
what
give
we're
it
on the
up.
nose.
I don't think they want to give it, I wouldn't want to give it up.
well,
I mean,
that's,
they
respect
could
but
put it
that's,
from somewhere else.
I respect that, but.
But we don't know that.
Yeah.
We don't know how the rest of the property is going to test, so to
Correct, we
give
don't.
up,
Well, we're not proposing anything on the rest of the property at this time.
I understand, but if,
yeah.
Well, I mean, if I can ask one question, is anything we're proposing here not allowed within the regulations?
You're over, well, we talked today at a session about extra capacity.
We do it all the time.
Yeah, extra capacity was challenged when we did it down at our strip mall. The state said, this system's over-designed, get it back to where, so that way you're not stressing the environment any more than it needs to be.
And
So-
I would
And you're
think over
proposing
designing is
s-
stressing it less.
you're
Well,
proposing
you could add
seasonal
more to
use.
it if you did 3. You could add 2 bedrooms to that
Correct,
if you
they
wanted
could.
to.
And that would be the purpose of doing 3 bedrooms. If they made that into a guest house, it would be all set to go.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
take 2-3 years.
Or even a house.
They put a guest house up.
It does meet new construction as relates to our regulations, but again, it leaves, unfortunately, a repair possibly not meeting new construction for the house. That's what it comes down
And
to.
it's a large, elaborate house and property, and to be served by cesspools, to me, is inappropriate, which is why, I mean, we've been working on a regulatory change for that. And so this looks like a recipe for disaster in the future, that this gets subdivided off, and this is left with nowhere to put a decent system for a magnificent home that really should be able to do better.
Darrell, what
So-
might help is if, in the seasons now, is to get some soil testing done to see if another system can be put on that property. That means that you don't have all ledge or anything, that's, would be ideal. At least to know, where the unknown is still there.
Right.
On what's available to that existing house. Is it ledge? Is it beautiful soil? We don't know. Until you get out there with a backhoe and do some soil testing, and Rob and I, or whoever, we really don't know what's in store for the house.
Yeah, there just seems to be a mismatch, given all the other.
And if they did subdivide, then and there were more people there, then they would need another well, and
Yeah,
then
exactly.
that changes all the setbacks.
Let me ask you this, but what if I did go back to the subdivided lot? Put the pool house on its own lot and call it a 3-bedroom house?
Then you need a well, too, right?
Then I can put a well, I'll put a well in too.
With the right setbacks. Is that, okay.
What I would suggest, though, while you're doing that, don't sacrifice the existing house, though,
But it won't sacrifice it, it was
Well,
already
if-
approved. on
I
the
don't
lot.
know what, unfortunately, you might want to speak to Paul Saunders, to see if he poked around and see if that was the only area. Why did he go way down there? Unless, like you say, it was already subdivided, so maybe that's why he went way down there. To the end. That does help the story, though, with the fact that it was subdivided back in the testing.
We took out the lot line.
All right, so I think, though, for us to know how we're evaluating this, it needs to be determined by the appropriate board in town as to what it is. So,
So we'll have them go to the building inspector and find out whether that's allowed to even put up as an accessory structure, pool house, whatever you want to call it.
yeah, is it a pool house or is it a new
Exotic.
in-law
Yeah.
dwelling
We'll do that
or
first.
of some sort?
And then we'll come back.
Because then we'll start to know how, that then would need floor plans for the existing house, potentially, if we're looking at this being a campus-like setting, and how are we counting all the rooms on the property, and how is it all being managed? But you're saying, at the moment, no variances are required for this?
If he corrects the building, if he brings those septic tanks closer to the cabana,
Okay.
Okay, 50 feet.
50, from any part of. So, if they're on an angle and you're still 50 feet, you're okay.
And then confirming the well distance.
Yes, and
The
you and Harry,
discrepancy.
the Title V inspector, and you getting together to show the accuracy of that existing well to the present septic system for that house.
Okay, right, getting rid of the need for
There were a
variances
couple-
will
yeah.
certainly simplify a bunch of things.
Yeah, and there were some minor ones, but those were the major two ones. It was like perks inch by inch. But the data was confirmed back in 2007. In fact, the previous owner, and when I was looking through literature, asked that we confirm it. So it's been confirmed. So if we can't get that data, so be it. I don't see it. I was there. I know it was a 18 per minute inch and a 16. So that's the minor part of it.
And then there's still, I feel like we should be learning from Cape Cod, which has wrestled with this so much. So to have something that's oversized and intermittently used doesn't seem like the best way to go about it. So, right, is it absolutely prohibited? We don't anticipate all of these unusual kinds of things, so the regulations don't cover it. And our regulations are based on DEP's model regulations, so they didn't anticipate this sort of thing happening. Doesn't mean it's an okay, good idea. So that's what we're wrestling with too, is there another way to approach this that would still provide what they're looking for, but also do better by drinking water quality for everybody? So that's the gist. I don't know, any other comments from anyone while we're waiting for just the determination of what kind of structure this actually is? Anybody?
No, I think that would be helpful.
Okay. So, any questions to?
We'll start
Okay.
there, we'll come back at it. and
Okay,
We'll take a little at a time and see where it goes.
okay, great, thank you.
It's not what?
It's not
It's
swimming.
not swimming.
Not yet.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Did we do the rabies exemption? Oh, these are the rabies.
I don't want to do rabies, but we can talk. Kidding, just kidding, no.
Sadie?
Yeah, okay, take it away if you want to
Oh, so.
start off the discussion.
So we were asked to provide an exemption for a rabies vaccination to a dog that has an endocrinological
Hypothyroidism.
disease and.
An old, sick
Yeah,
dog.
older, very similar to things
I think I've
we've done in the past, and maybe
Right.
in particular, this dog in the
Sadie,
past.
yeah.
So I didn't think it looked very controversial. And so I would recommend approving the exemption. Second.
Okay, and then I'll just have one other comment. So, again, we have seen this sort of thing before, and the owner, by filing this application for exemption, takes on responsibilities for ensuring that the dog does not come in contact with rabid animals and has other kinds of controls to protect others of the public. So I have no issues. So, anything? No, okay. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can you sign that?
There you go. Answer. Okay, back up. Oh, are you here for 41 North Main? Okay, so let's do that one next. It's okay with everyone. Okay, such a big topic. Where to begin? Trying to remember where we left off.
So I think I've attended at least the last couple of the public meetings where it came up. So I think there was the select board meeting that was kind of closed to public comment, that was updated presentation by the developer, and then there was a subsequent water board meeting that included I think it was an engineer retained by the water board, where they were again talking in some more detail with the developer about the, some of the details of the plan and kind of the water district and wastewater district, and then there's the follow-up that's happening, that's sort of the work group on February 14th at 7 PM.
That's
Then I think the
actually,
select
key
board is
thing is, right, how many of us can attend that, since
Yeah,
it's been posted as a
Yeah.
joint meeting.
yeah. I will be on a plane to California at that time.
David said he could.
I'll be there
Oh, excellent, and I will probably
February
be there.
14th, Thursday, right?
Yep, 7 PM.
There's a 50% chance I can go, but I have to check.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 50/50 for Rebecca, okay.
I will be en route to San
Sorry.
Francisco.
And you're,
Conflict.
okay.
And so I think the water board discussion was really focusing on the scope of a water district, and then also just the kind of general guidance and reconciling the difference in the estimates of the cost historically when this had been looked at for the, whatever the
Downtown
study
district,
was, the
yeah.
downtown district was a substantially different financial cost than what was being projected for the current project. And so there was some discussion about why those two are different. I think it was a mix of cost savings with private developer versus public bidding process. And then I think there was something to do with the system itself. I think one of the questions that I raised was just to understand the projected size, because the kind of scope of the project has changed on several occasions. It sounds like the wastewater treatment system they're talking about is a modular one that's like X thousands of gallons per module. And so that's where the difference between the like 40,000 gallon with the potential for like 100,000 plus. I think there were some questions when they'd done the previous projections for the downtown wastewater district in terms of what we're getting now and whether that's new development, and then also the cost projections in terms of, if you look at the Title V volumes, for example, for how much the project would require, it'd be like 80% of the current design would go to support that single project, including the sort of Hunting Lane parcels, the development, and they said that in this case, it wouldn't be governed by Title V. They would sort of go to like facilities. They wouldn't have to use the sort of bedroom count estimates, but they weren't able to provide an estimate at that time of this is the volume of septage or whatever.
Or even a percent, like, I thought that they had bandied about this, like, 30%, like that.
I think what they said at the meeting with their engineer who's sort of supporting it is that that wasn't what was provided, and so, like that is part of what's being figured out, but was not yet determined. And so I think, just the clarifying question of what is the basis for the calculations? The Title V would seem to suggest it was high. What the engineer said is Title V is a very conservative estimate, and so that would be how they would estimate it, were they to estimate by Title V, but that would not necessarily be how they would estimate it for this project, which I think would be like a like system calculation or something.
I'd be interested to see, because I have a client who had a large office building, and they had to size their wastewater treatment plant according to the floor space, even though half of the floor space was taken up with equipment,
Yeah.
computer, other things. So, but it had to be sized for as if desks
Right,
were filling the whole area.
Because it could happen. Somebody else could have that
Yes.
building in the future.
Yes.
And so I think that's one of, like, if we think about the issues we would
The
want to
pros
see
and cons.
raised in the context of the Board of Health's expertise, I think understanding the scoping of what's the treatment scale that you're talking about in the context of the wastewater district. It sounds like the other piece that was discussed at some length was it sounds like there are two maps that have looked at the downtown wastewater district before that are roughly similar. I think the water board, water board or whatever it's
Downtown
formed,
Water
right?
Study Committee.
Whatever that group is, was going to reconcile those two, and then there was a discussion about the paying for it in terms of would it be a betterment or how would it be paid for? Because they were describing doing it in stages where they would do, I think, the septic first and then the water treatment, then the water, because they said they could start getting funds. The clarifying question I asked in that context is like, how can they use it for residential real estate or any other real estate development that generates funds if you can't supply water to the property because you don't have a public water supply? Because they're now talking about a public water supply not on the property but at another off-site location with piping. And so that was not discussed in as much detail at the meeting. But they were sort of talking about doing it sequentially, which didn't make a lot of sense to me since you couldn't make money for a property you can't have water to.
Right.
And then there's a question of whether they could have a betterment for the wastewater district, which is one mechanism for how to cover its costs if that was paid for under a TIF. So there was a bunch of clarifying questions they're figuring out. I think the salient ones to us are kind of having some specificity of how are they calculating the size of the sewage output, even if we're not the approving body. I think it's a context of our expertise to say this is one of the important issues for the select board to understand, because if they're saying, oh, well, it's a 40,000 gallon system, and then we say, okay, we're on board, and then 6 months later we say, well, it turns out that's not going to get us new stuff. We're going to make an 80,000 gallon system after we voted on it at a town meeting or something
Right.
else. I think that would be a source of concern for the
And
community.
even though, I mean, we are paying for it as it's
Absolutely.
currently proposed, but they would pay for it first,
Right.
and then we would pay for it. And then the town would own it and be responsible for operating it. So we need to think
Right.
about some of
But I
these
think
things,
the other
because I
point-
could see we're in assisted living, you could, but we might have to think ahead and
Well,
be
or
able to
if you say
specify
there's
things such
100,000
as.
gallons and a bunch of properties built on it, you now are locked into perpetuity in this thing. So that was one of the butters
X
raised
number
out
of
concern
gallons
was,
or-
you now have a building density in downtown that can never be supported by traditional septic. So the ability to say, oh, what do we do if it breaks? That means that the community at large is essentially at risk for that.
Yes.
And then we also had the discussion of, in thinking as the board does about abutters, and we have lots of North Main Street properties, or Main Street properties that come to us. The comment I made, not on behalf of the board, but just in sort of thinking about board issues, is it gets much harder to justify a variance that allows somebody to retain a private septic system when they could tie into a public wastewater treatment facility. And so I think most homeowners would opt to do that, because in general it would likely be cheaper, but I think it does have implications in terms of, it gets harder to justify a variance when somebody has a safe alternative.
Also, some people may not need to replace their systems right away, and are you holding open a spot for them in the wastewater
For when
treatment
they
plant
inevitably
for
fail.
when they are,
Yeah.
versus first come, first served?
Yeah.
Right. And then I think it's also just a question too of, I think we've certainly seen other parcels on Hunting Lane where people have had parcels that they wanted to divide or develop. And much of that property is not developable currently between ledge and high groundwater, and sort of the question of who gains access to the wastewater treatment. If we're saying our goal is to promote commercial growth to kind of diversify the tax base, then if we're opening up residential parcels that are not currently buildable that are in the wastewater district, and you're sort of building a lot of 1 acre lot houses, that may paradoxically worsen the tax base challenges. I think that the Board of Health relevant piece is just to note the development constraints that exist on Hunting Lane that affect some undeveloped parcels that will now be rendered moot because they could potentially tie into the wastewater treatment system, depending on if they're in the district. And so,
Did anyone bring up what we've discussed a couple times about with assisted living and the pharmaceuticals, that it's not only the capacity of the wastewater treatment, but, the capabilities and the treatment technologies?
I think their engineer was more sanguine than Board of Health has been in terms of the ability of the technology they have. I can't remember the details in terms of what gas or what light or what the piece
Well,
was.
it's usually a multi-system.
Yeah, there was some facet of it that he felt like the treatment of those would be adequate, though there's a gap in data about it, so.
Okay,
yeah.
I've done some research on that
And
since
again, I
then.
would say, I'm paraphrasing, so I'm not sure that I have that
Yeah,
perfectly,
there's
that's my
Upland,
recollection.
There's GAC,
Yeah, but I have, anyway, just so I don't forget, at the planning board meeting last night that I went to, for Silverwood, but then 41 North Main was discussed, I volunteered, if you could check our files, in addition to checking on the soil conditions and existing septic issues on the Jameson fields, see if what we have about the Hunting Lane property, just to know if it can support septic, as Matt was just mentioning. Can it support septic? Did they do enough testing there to understand the whole property, or did they really just pinpoint and test in one area?
Did they
So,
say that property was tested under our review?
it has one house on it at the moment.
Oh, with the
Had to have
houses,
had
okay.
something, but it may have been, they may have
Yeah,
just
we
figured
looked
out
at that
what it is to
a good
test.
2 months ago, and I apologize, it was in our minutes for me to pull the file for Pine Hill, which I forgot to. It's been a little busy.
Jameson, yeah.
But for hunting, I believe that's all we have there. I thought there was a time when, maybe 5 to 10 years ago, they wished to test in that close area to the North Main Street, but there was some issues with crossing wetlands, I believe, and I don't believe they ever got to that testing, where they planned for the homes.
Okay, but just to check what.
Sure, with the
what
houses-
the
house
current
closest.
house, any testing associated with that, or any identifying features, just to
Sure.
see if we know anything more
On
about
the,
that.
on the west side of Hunting, right, which would be,
Isn't it
yes.
close to the
Yes.
Main Street?
Yeah.
Like it's at that-
It's sort of, like,
Triangle
there's
kind.
essentially, I think there's like an existing 2-acre property that's up here, and then they sort of have mapped out the 1-acre lots that they're proposing to change in the zoning kind of
14 though,
south.
so it's
Yeah.
like,
I think it's retaining existing house and adding properties. I think it's available in the plans that have been distributed after the select board meetings. They sort of have a graphic of it, and I think it's sort of like, there's a house up here that I think is the original, and then there's a new development there. They don't specify the bedroom count. I mean, there's not much detail in the size of the houses. My assumption is they'd probably be 4-bedroom. If you're building new here, it's hard to imagine that you'd say we're building 3-bedroom houses on 1-acre lots that we don't have a bedroom count restriction on.
and just as it relates to Pine Hill, I was out there a good 5 years ago with Rob Scott Septic Corporation, and we evaluated pits, if I'm not mistaken. There was some concern that they may be in failure, so, but they were evaluated and we didn't find that, so, but they are seepage pits out there.
And so would the seepage pits be impacted by the proposed regulations in terms of the cesspools or the other pieces?
Well, they're conventional seepage pits, not cesspools.
Okay.
There was some issue with the cover, I think, is what we were
Okay.
evaluating. So,
I guess the other question that may be, again, I don't know how much, I think the wastewater district discussion was sort of before my time. Again, it's not, like, I think understanding, like, there's lots of solutions that are being proposed for a single system. It will solve Town Hall, it will solve Pine Hill, it will help the fire station, it will help these properties, it will bring a new development. And I just wondered the degree to which 40,000 gallons is able to do all of those things at one time versus not being able to. And I just think helping articulate those questions hasn't been the key. Like, I think select boards thought about lots of things very thoughtfully and deliberately, but I think being specific about some of these, just because it's one of the things that stands out to me, is that it feels like we're solving a lot of problems at once with one thing, and it's not totally clear to me, having not seen the map, to say, like, Pine Hill's this many gallons, fire station's that many gallons. Are there special considerations if the fire station's doing it? They've got a pump truck. What does that mean in terms of the production that must be there? What's the redundancy? If we're saying the fire station's there, they've got pump trucks, we've got rural fire trucks, like, what does that look like? You know, what's the factor on that? And I just haven't seen that level of granularity, though my assumption it's in whatever the downtown water district was. As they discussed it, it sort of would extend, it was sort of a desire not to have pump stations was one that was articulated at the water board meeting, although that wasn't held by everybody. It was, you know, sort of one that was articulated as a value and one of the things that should be considered in looking at the wastewater district.
yeah, have they looked at the age of the septic systems served by municipal as well as non-municipal facilities within North Main? Because ours was,
I don't know, I just, like,
there's been upgrades. That's the only reason I
Yeah.
ask. I don't know if there will be interested municipal or
Yeah. I mean, I
private
think that-
parties interested in tying in right away because they spent
a lot of money to get there.
Right.
I
Some
mean, I
money
think
to be
what I
where
would
they
say is
are.
the water board discussion, I think, was really thoughtful. Like, everything may not be exactly the way that I would think about it, but I think that it was generally thoughtful discussion that was based on people thinking about it a lot. I think the big questions, though, are we have these siloed conversations. I'm sad to not be able to join the work group. I'm glad that there's a work group, but I think just being able to articulate this and figure out whose purview is it. And I think for us, it's just to kind of have some general sense of what amount of residential development has been constrained in those areas by the availability of septic. And that certainly affected my understanding is it's affected 41 North Main historically. And they sort of initially said, we can build the public water supply on the other side of the tracks. Now we're talking about a different public water supply to support the municipal area. They sort of, my recollection had said that it was difficult to build the septic on the property that they had, which is why the discussion at Jamison Fields first happened.
It was more for the projects that I saw come before the
Yeah.
Board of Health, they were big,
Yeah.
you know, markets and housing and So the property might support something bigger than what's there now. The question is how big.
Right.
So that's, and they were pretty elaborate projects
Right.
in the past, so that's part of the issue is how big and what they support.
Do you think there's any utility for us in terms of the work group meeting, bringing the minutes from any prior board discussions for those projects? Because again, like, I've been here 7 years, and so I know a piece of it, but I feel like the tone of the discussion certainly suggests 41 North Main has been talked about for a really long time,
Yeah.
for a lot of different things.
Right.
And so I think just understanding that larger context for the community at large to be part of that conversation, because
Right, it's a huge part that's under, the complexities of which are perhaps worth including our discussion or something.
Right, and I
We should
think
even
even
be
just to have it
prepared.
prepared to be able to say, over the last 15 years or 10, like, again, I don't want Ellen to beat me up, but just to figure out, like, where has Board of Health thought about this property as different projects have looked at it? You know, I don't know that we'd say, here's a summary of that, but just to have it available for when questions come up, so we can kind of say, this was the discussion we had at the time.
Well, and often they, still goes back to my
I moved this one, I'm sorry.
an issue of there's a reason that urban areas don't have well and septic.
Yeah.
It just gets hard when you're trying to fit all of this on land where everything is integrated and there's a more direct connection between what you're drinking and what's being put back out into the ground as a wastewater. So, often in the past discussions, because I've been part of the downtown water study for
Yeah.
quite some time, and others, and on water commissioners, so we're always looking at these issues. We're always lacking the details. And
Yeah.
it's hard to get down to the specifics of where everyone stands, who's really going to want to participate, because in the past, even though the downtown, there would be business associations who would talk about having some of this addressed so that there could be more development downtown, but then the sign-on of everyone who was willing to then hook up to whatever centralized system might be installed varied,
Yeah.
of who felt what they had was okay, and they weren't ready to participate in the new expense of another system. So there's that. We've looked at bringing in water from MWRA at one point, and Dover came to speak to us about that. They had extra capacity at the time, so there was some interest, but it was very expensive to run the lines.
It goes back to 1995.
Eric Johnson, knows what's going on with Framingham's water and getting it from MWRA versus in town, and they're in a bit of flux. I think, I can't recall where they have landed now. I think at the moment they're staying with MWRA, but they have the option to maybe redevelop their wells in town. So the other piece with the,
Well, no, I'd just be curious if Framingham then sort of said, okay, now we're pulling a municipal water supply in, like, what does that then look like? Is you have general chemical or other
they
pieces?
have wells around town,
Yeah.
and they were looking at revitalizing some
Yeah.
of them that had been abandoned for a while. So one of the things too so for me, what I'm most familiar with is dealing with wastewater,
Yeah.
usually industrial or commercial, and I find the comments too glib when people talk about we can do the wastewater treatment, and I would say that yes, there are always more technologies that you could keep throwing at the wastewater, but that's more cost. Just a more
Maintenance.
complicated system to operate. There's that ability to know what you're going to be getting in the water, and I'll just use the pharmaceuticals as the example, because that's the one that is, we're expecting more, and frankly, a project of this size is just going to have more stuff, even if there is a higher level of treatment. It's not going to treat everything that's coming out, but it's still going to be, so let's say the treatment is twice as good, but you have 4 times the volume. It's still more that's going to be
Yeah.
going into the ground.
Or concentrated, or, yeah.
Right, and then with pharmaceuticals, they're ever-changing. So we can't know now what's going to be the new pharmaceutical issue of the future, or disinfectants and all the things that you just have to know about and know how they're going to impact your system. And I've seen systems get wiped out in performance because one of the contributors decided to do floor stripping, and the slug of stuff that went through would
Yeah.
wipe out all the bacteria that's helping the system to run. They were fortunate in that case that they had enormous tanks for storage, so they were able to trap and hold and kind of selectively treat and manage and have time to hold stuff back while they got the facility fixed up and running again. And I mean, so there were things that they had the luxury of doing that if we're operating close to capacity or squeezing in system components is not going to be easy to do. And one of the things that several people have mentioned that they're talking about is we'll put in an RO system. And for decades, I've been hearing RO proposed as the panacea for all sorts of wastewater issues. And they're just really complicated systems to run. So all
What's
this,
an RO
these are reverse osmosis. So it's
Oh, yeah.
membrane.
Yeah, I think, and that's a
Yes,
system.
the magic.
Yeah.
Well,
Not for everything.
not for everything. The composition of your water, specific composition of your water can affect how it performs. It can erode or degrade or scour or
Foul.
clog
Yeah.
the membranes at rates that you wouldn't expect. And even well-performing RO systems, 50% water, so it's taking and it's using differential concentrations in the membranes to help separate things. So you're taking a dirty water stream and you're getting cleaner water and you're getting more concentrated contaminants in the other stream. But it's not 90% 10, it's more 50-50. And sometimes it's not even 50-50. So you still have, what do you do with the really contaminated stuff? Truck it away, maybe add more treatment trains for that, subsequent. Again, I go back to the easier way. If I had to run that treatment plant, don't let some stuff come in because they can do more effective treatment on a smaller scale for targeted streams before it gets there. And so my thing is that the town knows what they're stepping into.
Right, that this is not a
That
trivial.
this is
like-
not
Right.
easy. It's not
Right.
easy to run.
And I think there's a lot of discussion about the sort of who says this, where does the risk set, and then also, like a third-party vendor can come support it. So a lot of towns have like sold this and done that to somebody manage it.
But
the
it's
piece
only
then
as
is-
good as the equipment they come to deal with.
But also, again, you're now saying,
Situation.
you're further and further away from responsibility and control, that you're now saying, like, what are the kind of core goals and priorities? Okay, what is a contract with the vendor? When frugality faces, safety, how much do we want to be navigating that tension where you're sort of like, you've met the minimum standard for the state? Is that the goal, to kind of have it as dirty as possible? Or, you know what I mean? Like, if you say, this is how we need a system to perform, the people who live, and the butters may say, I would like a really, really, really high-performing system. The state may say, this is the minimum requirement that you have to have, and we're sort of figuring out, how do we manage it? And you're like, here's my vendor who says, oh yeah, I'm taking care of your system. It seems like we've sort of abdicated our responsibility as the town of oversight. I mean, again, they'll be compliant, but the degree to which we're going to be.
Except if
No, but the
If we
contract
as a
would be with
town are
us, so that's.
eventually going to
But
run
then
it.
if you then say to Sherborn town meeting, okay, it'll be an extra $250,000 to get to this level, or you can save the $250,000 and still meet the state minimums. That's a set of choices that's very different than the ones we categorically face today, where you're like, here's our
Well,
broad.
people have to
yeah.
understand that that's, when
That's-
you're
that's
accepting a
part and parcel,
wastewater treatment
right.
plant,
That-
the performance standards are set, the state, that, I guess we could always choose to augment, right?
Yes.
Right.
As owners of the treatment plant.
Right,
The town
once
has
we're
the
the
right
owners,
to
yeah.
do whatever
But this is like,
you
I
want to
think
do.
we're just like, this is one of the things for us to think about, is this is one of the.
But we're
tensions.
not, if we don't design it, so like if it's designed by the
But if you say this-
developer
Right.
to meet the state requirements.
Minimum.
Right,
Yeah.
then, but then I guess we could just say, okay, well, if we wanted something different, we'll either give you less of a tax rate reduction or
But I
work
think
with
that,
us.
but I think
Yeah.
that should be one of the pieces to just think about and consider in the workshop, is like, this is a piece to think about in terms of, this isn't a module that you say, like, it's not SimCity where like, I put in the wastewater treatment plant, they're all the same, it cost me this many points, I built it and I'm done now. It's that there's a set of choices one makes about what's the technology we're using, how are we expecting to perform, what's pre-treatment or post-treatment. There's a lot that goes into that that's not trivial, that's very specific to the project, who the tenants are, what kind of business they do.
And then the other thing is I started researching pharmaceuticals and how they're handled by various types of wastewater treatment. And so there are a bunch of studies. This is a concern out there. People are trying to figure this out. Trying to remember, and I have all the links, so I should probably put that all in a file and send it out so people can
Yeah.
click through and read those. I think the largest study covered 100-something different kind of pharmaceuticals, which is, certainly a fraction of the potential. So there are some that get treated very well by wastewater treatment plants, and then there are others that pass through barely touched. So no matter what the technology. The one I remember, and I forget they had the techie name, but I think it's what's Prozac.
Yeah.
So, and I assume that would be something potentially fairly common. So in any case, there's a mix of performance for the different kinds of drugs. And maybe that's even something that, if it was easy to identify the ones that are definitely handled by a biologically based treatment system, and whatever other components are put in there, maybe that could allow for some further gradation of how they're dividing up wastewaters coming from the facility. Might not be worth the risk, because oops, if they goof, and they put someone in a room that's connected,
Yeah.
and
I mean,
and something that's treated well.
There's a lot of.
But there may be ways to say, okay, certain things could be handled and would be acceptable, but that's just part of the complexity.
I mean,
It's
but-
not as simple.
To be honest, though, I mean, there's hospitals all over the place. I mean, we design systems all the time as well, and, they function
pre-treat.
pretty well. And,
Yeah, and they're
we've had a lot of
pre-treating.
success. And so most things can be treated really well, and no technology is gonna get 100%. And we can't manage to have a goal that's 100% eradication. It's just not gonna happen. It's unrealistic, and it's not appropriate, because we all have, everyone has to have some level of risk tolerance in their life. Getting in a car is much riskier
The problem
than
is
a lot of that.
that a lot of the recent observations, like tadpoles with, congenital anomalies that are attributed with certain drugs, all these things are they're considered emerging contaminants, not because they're not significant, but because they're not regulated yet, but they're
Some of
on the
them.
radar.
Yeah.
Because there are significant findings that were unexpected observations, and, so things might change in those regards. It's not about choosing to look away, it's just that.
Right, but,
Well, I
and
think
we
your
understand
point
that
is
things
that
are
you're
more
sort of
dangerous than we
like, zero
thought.
risk isn't a reasonable, like, it's not one that we hold the new septic system
Right.
to.
Right.
It's not one that we can hold the
Right.
wastewater
So
treatment
you
plant. I would
anticipate
highlight it as an
well-
issue to
right,
say,
as well as
there are
possible.
limitations in the technology. It doesn't mean this project isn't appropriate. It may be appropriate and inappropriate for this or other reasons,
Right.
but it's one of the issues to be cognizant of as you design and contemplate the
Eyes
system.
open.
Yeah. And then I know that.
The other, just
Okay.
quickly, so in terms of hospitals having pretreatment systems, because there are all sorts of regulations about what could go into the MWRA system, and lots of prohibitions on different kinds of, oh darn, it just flew out of my head, but there's a TSCA regulation that applies to things specifically for medical facilities and what can go into sewer systems, municipal sewer systems. But in any case, a lot of this stuff doesn't get tested for. So those systems appear to be performing really well, They're not testing for the whole suite of those contaminants, which is a lot of what this literature I was reading is trying to get a handle on. Nobody knows what to do. Everyone from departments of environmental protection to WHO, the World Health Organization, are trying to wrestle with, oh my gosh, how do we even test? It costs a fortune to do testing for this really diverse, wide-ranging set of contaminants, and what do you go after and look for?
Right.
So I think for kind of key issues, just to kind of, I know you guys are here for this, is there anything that we've talked about before that you've had from other places that you're concerned about that you'd want the board to contemplate in advance of the meeting on the 14th?
Yeah, I would say, and I don't know if you were touching on it with item number 6, maybe chair's business, but obviously, I'm not sure where the water is coming from, whether it's coming from Hunting Lane. They've also thrown out other places in town, Morse Pond, Farm Pond, I don't know where it's coming from.
I think Morris Pond was the last one that was discussed, but it was very lightly discussed at the water board meeting. Much more of it was on the wastewater treatment. That's my impression of what the source is.
Sure, and, what we're concerned about, besides, Frank would be concerned about the man property, what they're going to do with the man property, since it's zoned for 2 acres. We have a scenic road, and, we want to try to preserve the neighborhood, but also, talking about contaminants, in terms of our wells and our septic systems, maybe are the most likely to be affected if there's any adverse effects. If you live on Bullard, or you live on Whitney, or someplace like that, you'd be less concerned about, whether it's going to be contaminated. Maybe they don't affect the whole town, who knows, but certainly, we're right in sort of a 2,500 foot per yard zone of concern. So I know one thing I'm interested in, hoping that the Board of Health has within their purview jurisdiction, something that will protect us, whatever happens, that we're not really stuck in, having, I don't know what we do if we can't use our wells, except
Yeah.
we looking for the Board of Health,
I don't-
to help us.
So I think unfortunately, I think that would probably not be on our purview, just because I think that if it were a private well, the sort of question of, well, actually, I guess it wouldn't. It would be like if it were a second well, you'd have.
If not you, who?
Well,
I think
wait,
it's
are
a
you
select-
talking about, you're concerned about, they're talking about building a wastewater treatment plant on Jameson. Okay, so
think
not having individual septics systems.
No, but I think it's a question of either if that becomes a source of point contamination with its performance, which I'd say is probably lower risk, honestly,
Right.
than the septic systems that exist downtown, like whether one is for or against a project, I guess.
Right, the wastewater
I
treatment
still
plant
think the magnitude
is,
Yeah.
So even if performance is better, and this is,
Yeah.
something I probably have to just sit down and rough out, is the total loading
Yeah.
could go up. So sometimes it's a little ironic to me that there are people who are concerned about the current situation downtown being too much of a burden, and yet we're potentially increasing the total loading, even though each gallon may contain less if there's higher treatment.
there-
Yeah.
which there will be.
The total amount could be more. So
Right.
their wells may be
Okay.
at risk quality and quantity-wise. So we do need to have that some
And-
understanding of that,
and are we-
because it's not riskless. It's not
And are we asserting that they?
completely better.
Right, so I just want to make sure I've got the right picture in my head in terms of language. So I think what we're saying is the risk isn't zero, which is different than this is a high risk or risky situation. What we're saying is there's some risk, understanding that risk to the best of our abilities.
And we have
is
to
what-
plan for
right,
it. And
yeah.
that's the part that's never happened. It gets to a certain part of the discussion because there wasn't such a driver. Now we've got a proponent for a
So
project.
things like maybe
Who's the
monitoring,
driver?
like should we put in some deep sentinel wells between the treatment plant and the nearest private wells that get monitored on a semi-annual basis to confirm that there's not, contaminants that are migrating with groundwater to people's private wells. So I'm just throwing that
Yeah.
out there as, that's one possibility.
What's my recourse then?
Well, no. I'm saying put in wells way up gradient of your wells.
Say you discover something.
So if we find something, then that means you have to
Do you close the
modify,
facility? Do you
or
close
you
it?
modify,
And that's-
modify, Right, so, well, then, if something was found, well, you would try and make it so that it would be an actual warning system. It wouldn't be like, we found it here, now your well's already impacted. This would be in advance of that. But yes, we would have to take into account things like, okay, so we must need to modify the treatment system, take a look at what is it? We'd probably want to do some private well monitoring in a certain network or something like that. So I think those kind of things, to build in some contingency planning, makes sense.
No, and I think the town has to know what it's signing on for, because that may not be trivial. I also think since we have bedrock wells, rather than, if we had an overburden aquifer, I think that kind of monitoring close around the treatment, the
Still has to
leaching
get into a
fields.
fracture, though. So-
It does, but you don't know if it's on the same fracture as their
But if
wells.
if it's discharging, it's got to go through the overburden first, though, too. So
Right.
it can't just it's not going to, it doesn't zoom down
Okay.
with like a pipe into the bedrock. So if there's an impact, we could put it close to the treatment system, and, because if it's not
But I
impacting
think we
the
put it
overburden.
even closer. You
Fine,
monitor
maybe
the
put it right
effluent,
at-
no, you monitor the influent and the effluent at a much higher frequency than may be
And that's
normally
required.
required.
Yeah, I mean.
It is, but once a month for some stuff.
Have
Some
they,
stuff is more frequently, but there's a whole suite of things that's only once a month.
Do you think once a month isn't a lot? I do.
Can I ask something here?
Yeah.
What's your name?
Claude Dorn, 32 Hunting.
Glad to meet you. My name's Dave Sauce, and I've been here for about 50 years. So what you're asking, if I understand it, is that if your well becomes contaminated because of effluent from this treatment system, what recourse do you have? Is
I'm
that?
actually more worried about the blasting that's going to take place than the.
Oh, the blasting?
Oh, well, we'll get to
That's a
that.
different one. Okay.
Is there blasting?
I'm downhill from that
that's
blast.
the blasting guy.
They're gonna have to bring down 2 stories of hill to build this, unless they're gonna build a, mausoleum.
Are you talking about the houses?
No.
You're talking about
I'm
the
talking
tree-
assisted
oh.
living
You're saying you have to level that hill in order to
facility.
build
I don't
it?
think there's any other way to do it.
Oh,
Well,
I don't think
we
that
have
was
some
on.
proposed regulations that are on the agenda that I
Yeah.
worked on with the rest of the committee that
Yeah.
address that very problem.
Yeah.
I was going to ask a question too. Have they shown to the various groups that are reviewing this what the leaching field will look like?
No, I mean, I think
Way premature.
But it was like 2 or 3 iterations of project ago, and the one comment I want to make is just as David mentions, that I worry that those regulations will be a fair amount of time, and several will also be a fair amount. So I think great discussion. Do we want to put a limit on to say the 10 more minutes max for this topic? Just because I feel like we could easily talk.
How about -3?
Yeah.
The reason
It's been an
the
hour.
reason I was asking is, I'm starting to find out that the A layer and B layer, which are your top and subsoils, are your best soils to treat for some of these emerging concerns of contaminants of emerging concerns, as well as the polyfluorinated compounds.
PFAS, yeah.
PFAS, and so there's plenty of studies as you're reading them that are being conducted on some of these emerging contaminants of emerging concerns. And I would suggest that before you get too involved with it, that maybe they should indicate what this may do to the fields, because they really should be using those upper surface soils, because that helps to actually allow for some of the contaminants to dissipate more than if it was put into the gravel.
okay.
And that could change the shape of the fields.
And I'm thinking maybe we as a board need to consult with someone to find out how we protect. We have DEP regulating a bigger project because it'll be a semi-public or a public water supply or sewage treatment or whatever. I think we need to get guidance on how we can protect the interests of the abutters. Because that's what we're here for. Because
think
we
we'd
don't
have to-
even agree
but I think
on,
we'd have to-
everyone on the
But I
board
think
doesn't
you'd have
even
to
agree.
demonstrate, like, to be able to say that there was a basis for that, you'd have to be able to demonstrate that the treatment standards for the state of Massachusetts are inadequate. And I think you made the assertion before, which I don't disagree with, that Sherborn is one of a small number of towns with the
Yeah.
dependence on this. But in some ways, once you have that, we no longer are that same subset. Like, we now have a municipal water supply, and the ability to assert a kind of special status or a distinct class sort of mitigates, because you now say we do have a municipal water supply or public water.
What I'm saying is, that's true.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that their questions are, they have private wells, and
No, no,
they're
I totally get
butters.
it.
And
But-
I think the question is, what role do we play in representing them and their interests?
But I don't think we can say a compliance system that meets the requirements of the state of Massachusetts is something that requires protection from, right? So like if they have a Massachusetts public wastewater treatment system that meets the requirements for the state of Massachusetts, I don't know that we can protect them from that.
Yeah,
Well, we can-
that's worth clarifying. So the answer to
That's
your
all I'm
question
saying
is
is we should
if your
clarify
well
this.
becomes contaminated, whether it's from blasting activities or from a failure of a proposed system, there's nothing this board can do to protect you from that once it's contaminated. We've already had this happen since I've been on the board on Maple Street. What she's proposing is we could require to put in monitoring wells that might detect the effluent before it gets to your well. Or it might not. It might, okay? But the board can't protect you from that.
Well, we can advise and we can propone, but ultimately,
But
we're
we-
not the people who
We don't,
get to
there's not a
stamp
permit we
this.
approve to
Right.
say, you can't
Because
do
it's
this
a
if you don't do that.
public.
I think it's select board
Right.
is the negotiating party, or the ZBA or other.
Except as owners of the wastewater treatment plant, it's up to the board to set standards for what's coming into that treatment plant so that it performs adequately
But is that Board
for the
of-
quality of water discharge.
That-
But is that the
That
Board of
is
Health? But
going to
isn't
be
that
the
the
duty
wa-
of the operator.
No, I think it's
Which
the
would be
operator.
us.
Well, no, but like, is it us or is it the water board?
Yeah, and
Like, I
also,
think it, like, they're the ones.
I
talking-
meant us, the town.
Right, but
Yeah.
again, I think for the Board of
we're talking
Health-
about Board of Health.
Right, I don't think the Board of Health
I
would,
read your charter lately, I read it, I don't have it memorized,
Right.
but I think protecting my water is part of your purview.
but if you.
And
per-
I'm not a lawyer,
right.
I'm not an
Right.
inside
But it-
baseball guy.
but
who
it-
can-
But I can't protect you if you say the state of Massachusetts, like, the other thing is we cannot be arbitrary and capricious, and if we're making the assertion that the town of Sherborn is right and the state of Massachusetts is wrong about what is safe.
Because
we
we're talking
can't-
about a wastewater, a state compliant
Okay, you're
wastewater
stripping
treatment
into
plant.
the wastewater. I'm just saying in general, this whole development has issues and potential risks. And I think those that affect my drinking water are within your purview.
Right, so,
That's a
but
general
again,
statement.
right, but I think right now we're,
septic and
I think
everything.
right now the blasting question, we've received no plans from the developer, we can't comment on it. I think for the two pieces that are before us in terms of the meeting on the 14th, it's the totally ill-defined public water supply that has not, that, again, it's a question of the public water supply would be difficult to assert that there's a harm to you. I think, again, in the setting of a compliance system, we're not the approving body, we're not the regulatory body. I think our basis is, I can't say to the builder, you can't build this despite it not being regulated by me, because I don't believe the regulations are correct.
But we do have something proposed for bedrock disruption and blasting.
Right.
So if you want to listen to some proposed regs that we think will help for the future, now and in the future,
Right.
protect, do a better job at maybe helping anticipate and prevent these problems, that's what,
Right.
the stuff we're working on right now.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment or questions, I know you guys want to cut this off. In terms of, everybody raised a lot of good questions tonight, and obviously it's a difficult area. And we've heard discussions at the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, and everybody seems to say there's so many questions here. But nobody's telling, like, the select board, it's too premature to put anything up in the spring. There's just a million questions here that aren't answered. But I'm concerned that they're going to force us through, put something up, and an uneducated electorate in town who really maybe don't care as much as certainly we care about what's happening. It's just going to sort of say, this is going to reduce our taxes, this is great, we're going to have a place to go for coffee, we're going to approve it. And there's, 1% is sort of delineated, the other 99% has to be worked out, and leaving it up to the, group select board, whoever the select board may be, to complete the TIF after the fact. I don't want to mention the library, but I'll mention the library. that's just too much responsibility and unknown. So everybody's saying there's a million questions, but nobody's, I don't think, is really saying that definitively in public meetings. This is too premature. We gotta get all these questions answered, and maybe this project will get built the way it is, but it's so premature.
Select board could say, we're entirely indifferent to Board of Health, right? So like, for me, like, they don't need my approval to say, is this premature or not? I think we can identify these are the issues that we see as being relevant and that we think should be answered. They may say, that's fantastic, we don't agree with you, we are entering, like, that's the risk we run with the
Sure.
structure of government,
But
so.
I think it's up to the boards to say that, and then the select board can take that.
Right,
consideration.
but I don't think I think what we've commented on every time we've talked about is the plans have changed, we need specificity in the plans to be able to answer it.
We've said that
For
every
us-
time.
For us, I think, we are not an approving body for any part of this project. I think at best, we can inform the select board, there's nothing that we are approving for. There's nothing that, like, we had somebody come up at the cabana that's, being put in, that we can exert some influence over what that looks like and how it affects the people around it. The 111 Woodland, the shifted well, we can do that, because I have a permit, I can say, you can't have that permit until you do this. I've got no permit at any point in this process.
Right, I'm just saying, give them your opinion. If
Yeah,
that's-
I think-
so
I
they
think
have asked for that, and we've put together some notes, and we should try to get together, I don't know when, to finish that up, or I'll just give what I have. But, so we've been giving a lot of comments verbally, and they did ask for things in writing from different boards, so it's just, one more thing. So I have something drafted to get to them
Yeah,
on,
it's a big question.
here's a list of issues that haven't been resolved, and that's my concern, is that, again, for the project proponent, sure, wastewater treatment plan will do everything you need it to do.
But I think you guys should make your voices heard to the selectmen too. I mean, they represent, you're their constituency as a citizen. Yeah, I mean,
I second that strongly.
yeah.
This board doesn't have the regulatory authority to block this project, but this,
We just have the,
And we attend meetings.
Right.
a lot of-
And I think you've seen us there too. Like, that's not necessarily on behalf of the board, that's because we're invested in the things we're talking about, but we want to be transparent. Because if I said, yeah, you're right, we'll fix it, I can't fix it, and I'm not helping you by telling you I can,
Sure.
right? But that would be way easier, to say, no, you're totally right, we will stop this. I literally have no mechanism. That doesn't help you or the other people in your part of our community to kind of have a real plan of how do we address this. It would be way easier, people would be way less mad at me, and I could say, no, we'll fix it, we'll save the day, but if I can, and you think I can, and you don't take other steps to mitigate the risk, that did you no good.
one thing I think the town does need is a consultant who is not tied to particular technologies for wastewater treatment, but is really dedicated to understanding what it's going to mean for the town and what all the different options might be. We need someone
And
who
so is
can
that-
really
is that
dive
a
into
piece
the
of guidance
details
we
of
would share
that.
with select board at the,
That would probably be something that might, if they want to proceed more quickly, that has to happen soon, I think. As much as I would love to do it, unless I can't afford to spend the amount of time that is going to take to.
well, and I think the whole benefit is also to say, if you want an independent third party to provide impartial expertise, that's probably not going to be Board of Health, it's not going to be select, like, it's, it's to say,
No, we
who's a
really
third
do
party to
need
say, I'm
somebody-
an expert in
Interested
just this. Perfect. So I think we're at 9:15, and I don't table that to minimize the issues, but just to be cognizant of other stuff in the,
Yeah.
in the hour.
The other minor things, regulatory updates.
Why don't we, what I would say is, why don't we do the regulatory update now? 'Cause
If you wanna-
So I would actually stick around for the regulatory update.
we're trying to do things that are within our ability, and one is
Right.
related to ledge disruption, the blasting or hammering or drilling that would have to occur on that site, and what can be done to keep a recurrence from previous problems from happening.
So
And
let's,
so why don't
let's
we- why
jump
don't we
to
do
that
the
one
bedrock
first.
Disruption proposed regulation.
So I'll just fill you in. The basic idea is that we have seen several incidents in town that seem to suggest that doing stuff to bedrock where it's broken up may lead to the release of contaminants that get leached out and then are affecting water. And then upon research, that has been noted in Connecticut in particular, New Hampshire as well. David went up and met with folks. Very hard to figure out how to regulate it. Those two states I've mentioned, and University of Connecticut was studying it. They have not found a way to do so. So we are attempting to do so. And right now, it is, this is the starting point, and whether it would evolve into something else remains to be seen. But the starting point is that if someone, as part of their site development, is planning to do something to the bedrock, whether it's ledge removal or blasting or hammering, drilling, chopping up, scraping, whatever else, that in advance of starting that, they need to notify neighbors within a certain radius around that project or a certain distance from the project about that upcoming activity, and suggest that they get their water tested so that they can have a baseline, so that then it would still be a civil matter if something was found to have happened to the water. Not that that's simple, but it would at least warn people and highlight to whoever was planning to do that there could be some future liability as a result of that. And then in here, and this is what we're going to be discussing, is this okay? One option is banning the use of blasting agents that contain perchlorate, because that's a well-recognized contaminant, and other towns have done that. It is possible to have blasting agents without that. And then at some point, there could be guidance too about quick removal of any broken up bedrock material from the site, because right now the hypothesis is that, and it is known from other studies, that once it's broken up, the contaminants are just things that are in the rock anyway, but now you have a lot of surface area, so it gets leached out by rainwater and dragged into the ground and then taken up in wells. So that's the general gist of this one. We could read it, but that's kind of what it's saying. So for now, I mean, you can ask questions as we're discussing it, but do we have any comments on some of the edits that have been suggested? I'm trying to...
I think
I like all of David's edits.
David's are fine.
I think mine are fine.
The one thing
Dave's edits to Dave's.
Now, did one of your edits
So,
come,
no,
are
so
these
these are-
cumulative?
These are the same document, two parallel sets of edits.
Yeah.
Okay,
David's
they're
not-
parallel, they're not
I
sequential.
think David's edits are language edits, not
Okay.
big content edits, with the
Okay.
exception of
That's correct.
Yep.
Okay.
Although, the one thing I don't see in here is, so we say that they need a permit, right? And that as part of the permit, they have to demonstrate the notification, and then you saw in my edit that I think that they also,
Should do
need
testing.
to, that if any homeowner requests sampling, I think that they should have to do
Right.
it and pay for it.
Pay for it.
To establish baseline conditions before the blasting. I mean, that's always been my feeling. But I also think, for the permit, shouldn't we ask them to have a plan so that we can understand how they're gonna manage, piles, and are they
Right.
what are they gonna do with it? Are they putting stuff back in the ground? Are they gonna cover things? So
Okay, so here's
Yeah.
the thinking that I had for this. I agree with that, with all those things. But to get something out quickly, I think we continue to add to this, but my biggest concern is that people have the
Notice.
option to test ahead of time, because for the case that we had in town,
I didn't get
if
any
someone had
notice.
had a recent water study, I think it would have made their issue.
Easier, much
so to
easier.
Yes.
speak.
They had stuff.
Well, I agree with that. I think
No,
the
it was a long
urgent
time
matter
before,
is
so.
to get some regulations in place right away. Also, a
And
question
then
is...
figure out what do we want to ask for in terms of a
If-
management plan, and you've started writing that up,
Yeah.
if
lay
these
it out and get it clear. and-
regulations are adopted, then we can write the requirements for the permit, however we want, right? I mean, we're at least within fairly broad latitude.
Can we?
Right, I
Can we,
think
or
I don't
can't we?
know.
a form,
I'm
the
not
form
sure.
That's a
that'll
legal
come,
question, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you'll
Yeah,
have to do,
I think as long as it's
Yeah.
broadly
please show,
reasonable.
have
Yeah,
the
but
scale.
it doesn't
and
have to
show
be in
something.
these, in
Right.
this
So we can
regulation
call
here.
that guidance, right? Like what needs to be in the permit
Well,
app?
it's not guidance, it's requirements. The
Yeah.
permit
Right.
application has to contain
Right, it has
whatever it has to
lines for
contain.
put in this,
You know,
yeah.
removal of overburden and
Right.
not, no use of, all the stuff.
Covering or,
I don't want to go
whatever
through it
the-
all right
yeah.
now, but,
And then for the payment, I thought that might get a lot more resistance in terms of just a first go-round for informing, because I don't know what properties there might be, so I see the adjustment up to a half a mile away.
I moved it to a half a mile.
I don't know how many that means.
It depends where you are,
And
right?
how many tests? Are we only testing for
I just said
manganese?
metals, and I mean, I'd be happy to provide a list. I think it could be a pretty
Yeah,
annotated
because
list.
it
And then the
depends what
homeowner could always
rock
choose to do
is.
more,
Right.
but
Right.
on their expense. But I really think it's the metal, it's a select metal list that we talked about before. But I think that it should
Metal,
be,
minerals.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's really
Now,
the,
I have
So
a-
those, let's say, $100
I don't know
times
what the
50
pers-
homes? I don't know if that's
50
just.
homes and half a mile.
I don't know.
We're zoning, like,
Ivy
there's
Lane.
no
But like as a
Ivy
highlight,
Lane.
half a
yeah.
mile. I don't think there's 50 homes in half a mile.
I mean, I guess
Really?
that,
I think in Ivy Lane there would be.
Yes, there would
I'm
be.
just like trying to picture for like
There's
111
64
Woodland.
houses.
But
I
there's
used to
not
live there.
blasting
So
that's gonna
yes,
happen
you
there.
could have 60 houses in half a mile, or you could have 5,
Yeah,
right? I
right,
don't
yeah.
know. It depends where it is. The question I wanted to ask is, if we vote on these, can we get them into effect soon enough to have
we have a
any
public hearing?
impact on 41?
But I think what I would say is our regulations
Oh,
are
yeah.
intended, well, no, but I'd say broadly, I think.
Possibly.
Possibly.
Yeah, I think.
But I would reframe it, because I don't
haven't
think our goal,
submitted
like our
anything.
goal is a regulation. I think it's just important to be specific with the language. The regulations are not to address 41 North Main.
No,
I
no.
think it's really your question is one of timing, not influence, and so I think our intent is to say.
I agree with
Yeah.
you. It's not, it's aimed at a broad problem.
Yes,
But there is a
exactly.
specific issue at hand also.
Yep.
So they're both going on at once.
Yeah.
Right.
Because right now, if we can get through this and feel pretty comfortable with something, and then we would still need to,
it has to be in the
Public
paper twice,
yeah.
and then you have to have a public hearing.
So we're probably looking at April.
So I
Early
feel
April
comfortable
is
with the
the
regulation.
But
early.
basically, because this
That's
is not
quick.
a Title V regulation change, you could approve these tonight.
We
I don't suggest that.
could, that would be
I think-
breaking with
I-
tradition.
I don't
and
suggest it.
don't know that I would want to be a member
Yeah.
of the public and
Right.
have a
No, I
board
agree,
doing that.
I agree,
Right.
but I just wanted you to know that this is not a Title V
Right.
regulation change, so
So broadly speaking,
could
this
just
passes
post it
my
in the
gut test
paper.
for going to the next level. Is that where people on the board are?
Sorry, say that again, what?
So this passes my gut test if we want to say, let's move forward with
Yeah.
the process for the bedrock disruption. And so,
And the answer to the timing question is, it's a 2019 thing, not a years-long.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No, and then,
But
and
it's,
nothing says we can't just keep
Amending it.
amending and editing. So a question is, for that, so something we can handle by the permit and guidance.
Yep.
And maybe codify at some point. So really, it's the payment issue and whether we think that'll be,
And I would just ask, on the distance, although it's not a Title V regulation, where you do have to have scientific reason why you're setting the radius, but maybe if we can find something from another group that might have the
How far was her
radius.
well from the blasting?
oh, really close.
400
Well, we don't
feet.
know, there's a lot of blasting up the street, but,
Within 400 to 500 feet, the most. It was
500 feet?
maybe 200 to 400, because
Well,
it's
she was
a
across the
football field.
street, though.
No,
Well,
she
I'd say
was
it's
right
again-
on
I wouldn't-
the, the first house was 100 feet
Right,
from her.
but as we all know, the migration of contaminants.
Goes through the
can-
fracture, yeah, we
is-
know.
Can be a
Could be a
long
mile.
way.
which is
Could be
why,
3 miles.
right, I don't think
But
this
on
is
the other
unreasonable,
hand,
but.
if the people within a quarter
do a
mile,
half
all
mile for
directions
notification
aren't
or
being
quarter mile for
affected,
testing.
then people further away.
True, but you're assuming all those people are gonna voluntarily comply with having their water tested.
No, I'm not, I mean, it's
No, but
their
they have an
choice.
option.
What if they
Half mile
don't?
notification,
They just have the
quarter
option.
mile
They don't
testing.
If they don't, then it's on, I guess.
It's their choice.
This goes back to notification. It might be easier to have a bigger distance.
Bigger the better.
But within a
It's
quarter
Tying
mile.
in
Yeah.
the
Payment to a
paying
smaller
for
distance.
it,
Or immediate abutters or something, yeah.
yeah.
I might do, yeah. I don't feel strongly, but I like the idea of a bigger notification radius and a smaller payment radius without implying that the payment radius means those are the properties at risk and that the larger circle is not at risk. But
Yeah.
if there's a risk, it may be that it's the most risk, though it's hard to know that with bedrock fractures.
So let's say,
So what was the?
Well, you were gonna say something. I don't know what you were gonna base it on.
No, I was just trying to think, like, okay, so we know that that happened, but you think that's only like 250?
About that,
What is
yeah.
200?
The distance
artists
between the
as well.
blasting and.
Which, the
Oh,
proposed
the
41?
impact- No, no,
It wasn't
no, no.
blasting, it was ledge
You're
disruption.
talking about Maple Street?
Yeah,
Maple Green.
yeah.
That was less than a football field.
That's one incident.
No, right, so that's obviously, we want to be bigger, further than that.
Understandable.
Right.
I'm not saying one way or the other, I'm
so I
just saying.
could see immediate
evidence and
abutters
science.
as being maybe an easy one.
For the,
Do we know exactly what tests we would specify?
I wrote
Like
them
a
down in
m-
my previous edits.
Minerals?
Yeah. Remember,
It's
no,
like
it was
iron,
like manganese,
This is
iron,
all-
They're all
lead,
the different components of
Kev-
rock
you know,
in this
yeah.
region.
May
No,
I
I understand
suggest
that.
Yeah.
It's,
we make
it's
it
how
half-
many of them,
Yeah.
there's the RCRA, there's, you know, I mean,
Yeah, I
they're
mean, I
like
think-
standard tests,
right.
so that's what I'm wondering
I
is.
don't think the Rick Raid had the manganese though, so that's
Yeah,
why
right.
I wanted to make sure,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
Or
You-
do
you
we
can
just do
pay-
it by individual?
You can,
or
and it's cheap. It's literally like $20 a medal.
a medal, right.
$20 a medal, and I think I came up with like 5 or 6. So you're not, if you're doing blasting of bedrock to build
Yeah,
something.
you're spending a lot of
You're
money.
spending a lot of money. So if it costs you $500 in water testing, I'm sorry, that doesn't feel like a big burden to me. And if you don't like it, then figure out another way to build your project.
Right.
And cite it
So I guess a fallback, so part of what I'm concerned about is that we get to a public meeting, we learn something new that we didn't know before, and
Well, you
we
said
want
we
to
could
take
also-
it into consideration and make edits, but we can't, once we've printed what we're going to be voting on, the way it's been done in
Right.
the past is that it's either a go, no-go, not tweaking. But I'm wondering if, without going down a slippery slope, if we're eliminating one small requirement, not adding, but eliminating one. I'm just saying if it came up.
Oh.
And it's not a Title V, you know, so it's within our right to
Yeah,
do
you
it. I don't want to violate
Public
the,
hearing, you could change things,
Yeah.
take it under consideration after the public hearing, come back at another meeting, and whatever changes
right,
of
except I don't
discussion.
want to then
Keep going
take another
back.
2 months
Yeah,
No,
to
understandable.
to
But
repost and all
You
that.
don't have to repost the
Yeah.
changes at the so at the public hearing, if the board decides, let's add a mile, let's say, for example, that decision could be signed on at the next meeting with the modification to the document, so you don't have to have another hearing for it, because you discussed it in the public hearing as a change.
Yeah, that's the way DEP does it.
So
Okay.
it would not stall it in any way.
Okay.
Might add 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to avoid doing too many things, so if people felt they didn't come because they weren't concerned and oops, then it got changed. You know, I don't want to go down
You
that
wanna be
path too much,
transparent and
but,
kind of have people have a good
Yeah.
view, but at the same
Right.
time, you're like, this is a public hearing, and the intent is to get something that's close. I think
Yeah.
minor edits and adjustments should be in scope. The intent is still to have a transparent, open process, but
no,
not to
and
say,
I'm more comfortable
Yeah.
with the reducing something and saving, fleshing out maybe more details at a later point. So if we can see our way through that, then maybe there's a way to incorporate this now.
Makes sense.
Do we-
And again, maybe just for immediate abutters, something like that, and then
What would you,
expand it later.
what would you consider immediate abutters?
Is it
I
300?
just,
Well, across the street
I-
or next door or behind you.
Well, what's
because
the
for
definition we
variance,
currently use?
for
at
variance hearings now, it's 300 feet.
I would do the same
Oh.
standard.
Okay, then if
300
they have a number, go for
Yeah.
it, that's perfect.
Okay.
And I just want to note that, so
what we
we're
use,
50 minutes
300.
on this one, and then we either have 3
Uh-huh.
more, or we should table the other ones, because I suspect we'll have some discussion on some. Like, do we have to resolve all of these today? And if we do, we need to spend less time per regulation? Or,
Either that, or I would want to have a special meeting so we can get this out, so we
Yeah.
can be doing something in early April.
Okay.
That's my goal.
do we have to do all 4, do we have to resolve all 4 of these at the same time to post for a single meeting, or is the meeting
Yeah.
4?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So I think we should try to do.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Can I ask a question on this one?
Yeah.
Obviously, I haven't seen this, but is the only redress for the homeowner if there is some damage caused by the excavation or blasting to sue the person in court? Are
At
there
the
any
moment-
other remedies?
not that we're aware
Not at
of.
this point in time, and I think the ability to adjudicate that
So,
on our regulatory side will probably mean that this is, our feeling is get something on the books now to provide something, because our impression and discussion and exploring has been that recourse side will take a lot longer, and we don't want to have the kind of perfect be the enemy of the good to get something started. But I don't know that we'd feel like this is the last regulation that we'll be on. I think it's an important start, so that people at least know what's happening around them, and if litigation is their only recourse, at least they know it's coming, so they can test their well to give them the best shot in litigation of being able to demonstrate damages.
Because we were hoping to piggyback on what other states had developed, and that turned out to be equally difficult for them. So we had to forge our own path, and this was it for the moment.
This is part one, and you're going to think about whether there's any appropriate remedies.
Well, like,
There
so
has
we,
been more details. The two folks down here
And
have
we've discussed it.
done a
so
lot of
I think-
research.
I don't know the minutes, but this has been discussed in the YouTube videos, like we talked about for probably 45 minutes about
Yeah.
what are the different options and how we do
Yeah.
it. So it's definitely part of the public discourse. It was probably 6
I
or
don't
8 months
remember
ago.
which meetings,
It
but-
was like, it was when the Maple Street piece came up, or the
Yeah,
Main
but
Street
I don't-
piece. But so I would say, rather than rehash those now, those are
Sure.
rich dialogue, really exciting stuff. But did talk about the things we were thinking about, and the challenges we were facing and thinking about it.
Great, thanks.
Perfect.
So, question of clarification, what you guys saying is that you don't want to make it a half mile or a quarter mile radius, you want to make it the immediate butters
no, only for
only?
the sampling. So the notification,
Keep the half mile for the notification.
Then we're gonna add in a sentence that says, in addition, you know, either sampling should be offered for the following metals to abutters within 300 feet, right? Something like
All
that.
right, I get it.
Yeah.
All right.
So we're adding a sentence, but we're gonna keep the notification half mile.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, so for those people further out, they know about it.
Right,
They
right.
can make a decision, and, you know.
Did you say abutters and neighbors within 300 feet?
No, I
Well,
think it's
abutters
abutters, as
are
defined.
defined as neighbors within 300 feet. That's what Ellen says the town definition is.
Yeah. Well, for the Board of Health.
Right, but
Yeah.
I think being
Yeah.
consistent makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so let's be consistent.
Perfect. Do we feel like collectively that regulation with those updates passes the sniff test in terms of going to the next steps of public hearing and posting?
Yeah, I have to go back to the stuff I did before, though,
Yeah,
for
maybe
my
pull out
exact
the-
list of,
yes.
because I know we talked
Metals.
about it, I
But
just
that's
can't.
not in this, that
Are
list
we
is
able
not
to
part of this
say-
regulation.
I think
No,
that would
but
be the-
we're saying we're gonna add a
Yeah.
sentence for the immediate abutters.
No, but your point is there'd be testing, but the testing could be in the permit. You have to specify in the regulation, this is what we're testing for. Because I guess the question is, into
I
perpetuity, are we
think
sure?
because an extensive suite could be a couple $1,000s.
Right.
Of
Okay.
testing, so I think
And we're
unless we
saying,
specify
yeah,
that
if we're
actually
saying they're
says
gonna
it's-
pay for it, I think we
Yeah.
need to be specific about.
Okay.
I do.
the
So
list.
it's a caveat that, so we're not voting on any, are we voting on something for this? And if so, can we do a conditional to Lisa's review of what the metals are?
Sounds good.
And then also just the language about butters.
Yep.
Well, yeah, but that's the same sentence.
But are we
I
going to
can
have
fit
to
this in
sign
one
off on this
sentence.
at the next meeting anyway, really? To go
Yeah.
ahead with the posting? So either we have another quickie meeting some point in February, or we do it at our next meeting.
We don't.
And if we did it at our next meeting, would there be would we be able to have an early April?
I'd have to see. I
I mean, just in
I have
terms
to
of
check
posting
when-
in the newspaper.
Well, I don't know the newspaper deadline.
Oh,
Off
okay.
the top of my head.
Okay.
So I know it's an exceptionally long time.
Uh.
You can pay more and have it in like the Metro West Daily News though, and it would be quicker. So.
All right, so
I
I'll
just-
just say we might try to convene a little mini meeting at some point, just strictly to go over this.
I'll be there.
And then,
When would this mini meeting, be?
I don't know yet.
We'll have to
She's going to
Sorry,
check
busy
in terms of the
Valentine's Day.
timing so that we
Okay.
keep this moving along, because I think we just,
It's
Can't be
important.
Valentine's Day 'cause I'm busy.
Yeah.
I have a meeting with the.
no, I'm
developer.
thinking end of February,
Joking,
so.
joking.
Okay. Okay.
After school
Yeah, I'm in
vacation.
Tampa, but.
All right, we'll figure something out. There has to be
Perfect.
some day in February where enough
So,
of us are
and I
here
just-
to move it to the next stage.
Okay, only 3 more regulations,
Yeah.
one more privacy.
So,
All right,
so I'm confused so far about which.
So
I
we are
mean,
we are
You're
taking,
taking David's version?
so we're taking,
Mostly
we're taking
David's.
David's version, we're adding
With-
Lisa's paragraph.
I'm gonna,
where-
no, I'm
which
gonna,
is-
I'm gonna make
Something
like.
Why
a
don't I
sentence.
just
Fine.
re-edit? Because I had, these things in italics are like my notes to us, so I can clean it up and get it to you.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and anything that says must,
So,
you should
no,
change
no,
to
they
Oh,
should
to
shall.
shall.
And
That's
there
why
were
I
a
added
lot.
it, because I've always seen it that way.
It's always
but
been
So
like
haven't I,
that.
but someone told me, no, they took out the word
I think
material.
that person was wrong.
I have,
Well, I still see them.
Yeah,
So
no, that's
as
fine.
if it's
And I've
the-
always seen it that
I
way.
come
Doing
too.
that.
across them different times.
Quick comment, so
Yes.
material safety data
we
sheet, the
go.
new
That's what we
term
just
is
talked.
officially safety data
I
sheet.
heard that from
Really?
Darryl.
Part of the globally harmonized system.
That's what I thought.
Most people are familiar
Okay.
with material safety
No
data,
longer
but the
material.
new techie term,
And I must have heard it from Darryl.
It's like
All right.
Urban Dictionary.
Like
There's
this
this
EPA, worldwide.
We have an
It's a
hour and a half of
globally
stuff at our
harmonized
current
thing,
rate,
so.
so we just have to be tight,
Yep.
because we are not even into cesspits or wells.
So it is now an
I thought, are we gonna
SDS.
tackle all of these tonight?
Really, hopefully more quickly than this past one, but, quick question, I had the, under B, last thing, okay,
What?
4 weeks prior to the commencement of bedrock disruption, just to give them enough
Yep,
time? Is
yep.
4 weeks enough time? And can they just start after they've done that, 4 weeks in advance, or would we require a public hearing?
Oh, no,
No public hearing?
no.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right,
That's getting
excellent.
Too much.
Okay. B. Of,
No.
we're talking about bedrock disruption.
I know, but I need to find where, I was just,
So, okay, all right, so I guess we're done with that one. How about the porous pits and porous tanks?
The only comment I would like to make, Darryl, is what I made during the discussion on 111, 89 Woodland, is that DEP considers cesspools that have been modified either with the tank prior or leaching after the cesspool, as long as it's sealed, they consider it a tank now. So, but again, as Claire Golden said, you have the right to declare any system as a failure. So you just have to make note to the fact that if it's a cesspool with leaching area off or tank prior, it still fails, if that's what the board so wishes.
I think it just said if it's part of it, but let's check.
You see, the state considers a cesspool not porous once it's failed, and they, back in the day when they added leaching lines to them, they considered them, and they allow them to be considered tanks.
So the way it's worded here, the board has determined that porous pits tanks do not adequately protect public health and safety or the environment. Their presence is considered. So maybe a qualifier here, I don't know if their presence, I was thinking, I don't care where it is in the system, if it's there, it's not okay.
So the system that exists now at 89 Woodland, under these regulations, that would be considered a failure now?
because they took an old cesspool and made it.
Yes.
Any cesspool is an automatic failure, doesn't matter if there's pipes attached to it.
But then we had that way of, like,
If you're gonna build
It's-
something new,
Yeah.
then, and you have a failure on your of one of these systems on your property, then you have to upgrade it to get the addition.
But my opinion, which is why I made the changes that I did, is that it should be black and white. A cesspool is defined as failure, period.
Yeah.
End of discussion.
Well, that's why I wanted to make it clear that even if it, quote, passes Title V, but if we don't need it, we don't need it.
To
It's
me,
just-
the more explanatory stuff
Yeah,
you put in
That's
there,
probably true.
it leaves more wiggle room for arguments and legal disputes later. A single sentence, if the property is serviced by a porous tank, the thing must be removed from service, that's it.
Okay.
But just realize, Pine Hill School has porous pits. There are seepage pits that were allowed under Title V.
But that, it says as if it's subject to sale,
Sale,
transfer,
transfer,
division.
division.
What- Pine Hill isn't gonna be
I
sold.
know, but I'm saying other people have what we consider conventional septic systems, as defined when they go out to inspect them. They are not the antiquated cesspools, they're conventional systems.
oh,
Leaching porous pits were allowed from 1977, and also prior to that, in 1969, in Article 11, they allowed them, and they're still allowed, but they have to only be up to 2 feet deep. Prior to that, seepage pits were allowed to be up to 6 feet or more. So even the
Okay.
new Title V allows for seepage pits, so we just have to be
Okay.
careful with the terminology.
yeah.
And I would take it right from Title V for cesspool, to be, as David said, to be more direct with the language, so we don't interfere with the system that is indeed conventional, that was tested environmentally, because cesspools weren't. Cesspools were just put in anywhere they wished, no soil testing. That's why I
Okay.
agree with these regulations, but it truly should be a
Right, what I was
cesspool.
afraid is that someone would have sunk in, one of those concrete cylinders that has holes. That's often
That's a
used
seepage pit.
for,
But I might say like,
water softening
Yeah.
systems use that often for,
Yeah, so those would be dry wells,
subsurface,
dry
yes,
wells.
dry well, thank you.
So those are recommended by the state, especially for water filtration
Right,
systems.
and whether people, even though that would, it's a modern version of the old cesspool, which was dug in the ground and rock-lined or
Yeah,
brick-lined. So I want to avoid people thinking that that was okay,
Yeah.
even if it's still sitting in groundwater and not doing treatment and just having stuff flow.
So if we
So-
define a cesspool as a, as defined in Title V, I think we should be okay.
Okay.
yeah.
That's what
All
we
right.
want
But
to
I
do.
would echo
is-
that I think we should stick with Title V because making up our own rules is just risk for us.
But Title V allows,
No,
a
no, but
lot
I
of
think
towns
whatever
don't.
but I think the question of Title V's definition of a cesspool, we're using their definition, we're not saying it's acceptable, but we should standardize the definition of what is a cesspool, what is a room.
I think I did look at theirs and found it seemed like stuff might be missed. And
But I
then I
think we-
looked at other states and what they had.
But
All
I
right,
guess
but
what I
it
worry is that if we're
demands some
then
more
left to
attention,
adjudicate,
yes.
is it a cesspool or not?
Yeah.
Then I think we could say, what's the basis for that? And again, why are you submitting?
What they, okay, I'll just read the definition. Cesspool in Title V is a pit with open jointed linings or holes in the bottom or sidewalls in which raw, that's the difference between a seepage pit and a cesspool. It's not raw sewage, it's treated in a tank prior to the seepage pit, but it goes on to say, raw sewage is discharged, the liquid portion of the sewage being disposed by seeping or leaching into the surrounding soils, and the solids or sludge being retained in the pit. Cesspools are non-conforming systems. So, again, the only thing I would add to that is if a cesspool was modified with leaching lines or a septic tank, I would suggest that still be a failure. And the reason I say that is because you still have a cesspool in the ground that was
Yes.
put in there without any
Good, I'm
concern
glad you
for the
said that, because
environment.
that was my concern is, I didn't like the idea, I don't care if you put a tank in front, if
Yeah.
that cesspool is still not doing a lot
Yeah.
and not spreading it out and
So-
not allowing treatment, or it's in groundwater, then
I agree.
Uh,
In fact, the state wanted all cesspools removed back in 1994 when they created
But
the new
they-
Title V.
yeah.
But they got too many people in opposition, and they had a major hearing in Worcester, and so they modified Title V requirements to allow cesspools. But I agree with the board that cesspools are just not an adequate system to protect the environment.
okay. All right, so a little more work on that, and then, so on A, you crossed out the end of A.
I was trying to make it simpler.
Right, except part of our discussion was for people who might not be able to do the upgrades. We were talking about senior citizens or something, and that maybe some things, if they weren't completely failed, and that's, how we work on that, of they're kind of functioning, but they're not failed in the classic sense of a failed system, and to have the chance to do it at the change at the point of sale, or prior to the sale. So that was an attempt to incorporate that concept.
Okay, I didn't understand that. That's fine.
So,
I think the intent is still there.
yeah, and then there were other conditions where if it, and I guess have to figure out maybe.
And Title V allows you
It's
to
failed.
fail a Title V system that is in failure up to 2 years. So that maybe
Right.
we, same kind of concept. As long as it's not breaking out of ground or backing into the house, then you do need to replace it immediately.
Okay,
But you have up to
so-
2 years from the time of a failed Title V inspection report to replace the
There's
system.
paper failure and there's real failure.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're not going to distinguish, because, we're trying to be as simple
So,
as
but
possible.
Okay,
But I
yeah.
see that opportunity should exist also for a cesspool to be in concert with the Title V requirements.
Okay. All right, so,
And a lot of shalls change the must
yeah.
and all
Yeah.
that.
You want shall, you don't
Shall.
want must.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I'm saying
Ellen.
change it to shall.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Okay,
that's,
so, aside from just maybe either definition of cesspool and how more clearly to define a fail, and a fail that has to be replaced immediately versus a failure immediately within the standard, that's why I
Within the
had that
requirements of
standard
Title V.
process, versus something that could wait until sale, transfer, division.
Yeah.
And have those two levels.
And do we have to have a scientific basis to demonstrate why those are distinct?
Well, the Title V already says they're non-conforming.
Okay.
Cesspools are non-conforming, but they do allow their use, and that's why Title V conflicts with
And so then,
itself.
do we then say that, like, I guess the question here that was raised in Lisa's copy is, what are the reference regs for B, right? So like, is that Title V, like what,
Title V would not just reference the definition, but would reference them being as non-conforming. And like, it's unfortunate they gave some leeway to them, but they have to pass certain tests like percent of effluent within that cesspool, or if it's in groundwater, those type of things. But other towns have done the total ban on cesspools during the time of inspection, because they are non-conforming.
Yeah.
And I think that's enough where the scientific information's already been proven. Title V just gave a little leniency to it, the state did, based on that.
And Dover
Process.
pretty much requires replacement right away.
Is this their language?
Yeah.
I haven't seen Dover.
Some of it is their language, that the board has determined that, I can't remember if they, I don't think they had porous pits/tanks, but something along those lines. And then that's theirs. And the last sentence is ours. Timing. And that comes somewhat from Rhode Island.
Yeah.
Series of things. Okay.
I think it's a good idea.
All right, so, all right, the area of, forget it, that one's hard. Let's jump to additional wells.
Oh, and,
Last.
for the additional wells, one thing, I guess one thing I struggled with was when it was saying, like, installation of an additional well to supply multi-dwelling projects. Okay, that's clear. For water supply augmentation, for agricultural irrigation. So I think we should be kind of very selective about what we call agricultural irrigation. It's not like, I want to buy trees that can't survive in this climate, and so I'm going to pull extra water because I bought trees that can't survive in this climate. Buy the right trees, and unless you're a farm or something, that's, but if you're zoned agricultural and you're paying taxes agricultural, that's different than if you're just wanting to have.
So should we specify commercial?
Well, I just think,
Agricultural?
the Board of Assessors has certain properties that are zoned as agricultural.
Right, and they get tax exemptions.
And they get tax exemption. So if we want to limit what we call agricultural irrigation to those properties, I think we can just reference, properties zoned as such by the Sherborn Board of Assessors. Like, let's take our opinion out of it as much as possible.
I think that's perfect.
But, so the part I was struggling with in addition to that, though, is it says for water supply augmentation. To me, water supply augmentation means my well is shitty and I'm not getting enough capacity, so I want to install a second well.
Yeah.
But then, when you go to other use prohibitions, it's like, well, it says, for one, that, sorry, so I misunderstood this a little bit. Or irrigation, it shan't be used. So I'm just getting.
Well, that's why I
confused about
had it
mixing
highlighted, because
and
it's
matching.
inconsistent and.
Yeah.
And
So
I
should we just not even include it? Like, if your well's not providing adequate water supply, then drill a new well and decommission your old well.
Right.
So I guess I would
Okay.
lean towards just not even including that as,
Okay.
Because that's an additional well. That's not a replacement well.
Right.
Replacement wells are always
Yeah.
permitted.
Because the arguments were
Yeah.
weak
Okay.
in one of the cases.
Would
where
you,
this was relevant.
So,
that they were
so
talking
do
about
we need
wells.
to include then, so if someone wants to water their lawn or stuff with their one single water supply well, I don't really have a problem with that.
Yeah,
So
that would be-
do we need to prohibit that?
I would just make it that, put the word domestic irrigation and define it, so that, exactly what you just said, you want to water your lawn? You want to
Go
use
for
that
it. Yeah,
one
I mean, I
single
don't-
They
well?
run their one well dry, and then they come
Yeah,
and they
it's-
get a permit for an emergency new well. because
No, they could only get a replacement well though, Rebecca.
Fill the
So
old
like,
one.
they couldn't get a second well, they could only
Right.
get a replacement one.
Okay.
So,
And-
I mean,
Right.
and
No,
how
I'm
many
agreeing
people
with
are
that. I think
really,
that's a good idea.
you know
So
what,
don't
like,
do other
that's a
private
big
things.
expense, so like, maybe I just won't water my lawn if it's really
Exactly.
screwing up my supply. So
Right.
we want people to be mindful, that's
Right,
it.
yeah.
Okay, all right, so I think.
Right, I wasn't sure, I mean, air conditioning systems, swamp coolers, I wasn't sure what.
The old
are
air
using
conditioning
so much
systems
kind
were
of-
based
Yeah, I
on
don't know if I
water.
care about that
On water
either.
exchange, yeah.
Yeah.
Heat
So-
exchange
So,
with water.
some of this is old, but not, some of it isn't, especially if it's a heat pump, such as what we're seeing now for the geophysical.
And those are separate.
Thank you.
Yeah, those are whole separate systems and should be separate, and
But
they
that's
look a
another
little like a
well.
well, but.
Some of them are wells. Actually, it's the old-fashioned way of using geothermal, where they actually pump out water and waste it.
Yeah.
And that, we have one on Western Ave, and that would have to come to the board for a review and approval. The more recent ones, I think two, indeed, they're closed-loop systems. They're just
Yeah.
drawing that cooler temperature at the lower end, and they bring up the coolant and recycle it. And they usually drill several of them in an angle. So we have one
And
right
they're
down here.
doing some horizontal, they're all
So, but
different
still, I
designs
think
now.
that last statement is important, that they come to you for that review.
Okay.
And then the board can decide if it's overuse of water supply in the area of that well.
For open wells.
Yeah, open wells, are-
Closed loop geothermal, I
Would-
have one coming up. I
Yeah.
hope not that, see you guys.
you would see the board, and the board would probably say, as they've said in others, it's a closed-loop system, so, but they are, you don't see them as often, but they still use wells, deep wells, for heat pumps, or heating, geothermal-wise, and they waste the water. They the water goes to waste.
Probably shouldn't allow any opens.
Yeah, I mean, their theory is it goes,
But again, it sounds like that's resolved, everybody's on the same page.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think
that's
so.
been dealt with. Just one caution, if they can put in, they often put in a antifreeze kind of a glycol material. They'll say it's potable, and all the rest, but you really don't want to be drinking it, so question is it essential to have something added to the water? So that would be question number one. Is there any way to just avoid having to add something? And then making sure that they're really good
Definitely
joints
close
and seals so that that's not leaking out into the ground. Because everyone will say, but propylene glycol is in a lot of food, but over the years, on safety data sheets, they've been moving up the little health hazard rating. So it's not innocuous. Yeah.
I think they're trying to get to a if you find out, I think they're trying to go to a safer alternative, but it'd be interesting to know that. I think they may have on
I
Washington
just
Street.
want to manage our scope since this is
Yes.
out of the scope of the
Sorry.
rest.
So, okay.
And it's almost 10 o'clock.
Sorry.
Any other major comments? We're definitely going to have another meeting because I think there'll be enough changes, like trying to find a definition of
Oh, yeah.
domestic or landscape irrigation without it getting to be crazy landscape irrigation demands or something. I don't know.
And then yeah, never mind. Yeah, so I think those are my big,
Yeah.
My
Oh, no, and that's exactly the same thing, why I had it highlighted, because I was like, ugh, I couldn't think anymore.
oh, and did you see my question about Farm Pond? Like, would they be okay with us saying, like, you have to start testing the water at the, Farm Pond bathroom and stuff like that?
I had
They
the same note,
don't,
Farm Pond, question Farm Pond.
Yeah.
No, but they're not testing it now because it's used less than 60 days.
No, but you wrote
year.
here that we want to
It
start
would-
testing.
Yeah, they might have to go
You're
through
saying
the
for
same-
semi-public, so I'm just wondering,
Oh.
is that something that,
I had the
Is that
same
the
note,
Okay.
Farm Pond.
Now I see what you mean.
I've lost you again.
Hadn't thought of that.
Okay.
so-
We may,
All right, so maybe we don't put that in for now while we try and figure that out. I was trying to capture more, since why we had to have, we wanted stuff for the fields as, before they went to being a public water supply, to say it's a big system, it would qualify if not for the loophole in DEP regulations.
yeah.
So that's
also
all I
think,
was
like,
trying
our
to capture,
little
but maybe-
camps, too, like, the people might forget, there might be more implications of
Yeah,
this
so
than
we're
you
not ready
realize.
for this yet.
maybe temporary
Oh, or
use,
maybe, all
something.
right, let me either take it out or do something that says, strictly for residential,
Yes, I would do that.
because
Okay.
I
the
would just make
fields,
it residential.
Right,
Again,
because then
if
that would
not
get
for
rid
the
of
loophole-
Farm Pond,
Yeah,
camp,
because that's what
blah,
we
blah,
care,
blah.
that's what
Yeah.
we care about anyway.
that the DEP acknowledges they're trying to figure out how to address now all the projects that they weren't anticipating using that. Okay. To get out of the PWS requirements. All right, and then the last one was the area of impact analyses, and again, this somewhat relates to
Bedrock.
the fields and that the justifications for when extra studies are required before someone can do something. So,
Should it just say, I think David wrote the same thing, 2 or more, so we don't have,
Yeah, I didn't understand what 2 or 5 meant. at all.
I was trying to wrestle with, should it be
Oh.
more than 2 or more than 5 or
Or some
another
other
number?
Oh,
I just didn't know which number to put in
I
there at
didn't
the
know what you
time.
meant, so.
So I picked 2.
You picked 2.
I did
I
pick
think
2,
it's
too. I also did.
No, more
the
than
same.
one.
Okay, and then,
then
is it
honestly,
still
every-
discretionary enough? Because sometimes 2 units, we may not.
Also, I see what you're
No.
trying to get, like 5 or more.
But individual cases can be
Could be
dealt
any-
as individual cases.
Yeah, so.
We saw
can-
one at 4. We saw Brackett Road. Is it Brackett? It's been a while now, but Barracat Road.
Oh, okay.
They had 4 homes on that cul-de-sac, so
And it could
maybe-
depend on the layout and, things, what's
They
the
did an
other?
environmental health impact report, but it was
Yeah.
modified.
But that wasn't so dense in a way, so, okay, so
Maybe
leave in 2, but.
They can always come to the board for relief.
Yeah, and do we write that in? Like, do we actually say, you know, something about the board's discretion?
They can ask for a waiver from anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
would say too.
All right, so we could just leave it, they could ask for a
Yeah.
waiver, and we could advise on, yeah, we're likely to consider waivers for
People are considering.
less than
or
10,
requesting
but
them all
over
the
10,
time.
forget it, kind of, something, whatever the board decides.
If we do that, it jumps into the gallons per day too. And, you know, if it's 2 houses, I mean, if you're looking at 110, you're looking at 880, so do we want 1,000 versus 2,000?
Well, the reason I started with 2,000 is that was
Okay.
recommended by DEP, since they have a lot of, not a lot, they have a number of places in Title V where 2,000 is used as the threshold. And we could
They do.
change it again later, but I figured since that kind of had their support, and as a standard cutoff, is everyone okay with that as a starting point? You look pretty okay with it.
Good.
So you're putting on
I'm
your
not going cold.
jacket.
I also have to get
Okay,
up
we
to
have
go
a
work at
1
4
is
a.m., so.
good. All right.
Great.
Any other, I see the edits that are here. Anything else? Okay, so good enough. I'll take another stab at it and then harangue everyone about a quickie meeting at some point. So, okay, let's see, what else do we need to do before we can leave? We did
Silverwood
regulatory.
Farm.
Plans, I should start thinking.
All right.
Do that.
Okay, so the planning board had the meeting about Silverwood Farm last night to discuss the plans that we saw the layout. Oh, that's
Yeah.
right.
Want to see the plans, Darrell, or not?
I think we've seen them in the past. It
Okay,
showed the
okay.
building and parking lot and greenhouses. The planning board said that they needed some additional information from them, more around screening and exact locations of things and some more specifications. I said when it got through that, eventually it would come to you to make sure that they're not building on top of a water or septic-related feature or any other setbacks that were required. I said that there are still outstanding issues in terms of, we've been working through how to deal with the septic, because DEP did not want them using their current system, wasn't adequate, so something had to be come up with, and that they've gotten to the composting toilet stage, which so far looks good, but we haven't had a formal proposal and details on that, and that the hand washing sanitation issue is still outstanding pertaining to food service, and that is a DEP concern, and we are the enforcers for that. So, so that's all in the works. I did express a concern of how the existing bathrooms that are tied to the septic system are going to be absolutely cut off from use during events. So we
Darrell,
may.
just so you know, I did receive an
No way
email
you can
from
enforce that.
Paul Saulnier. He asked to meet with me to discuss something like a rain garden for the effluent, but the only problem is that requires a conventional gray water system, which has to be, per our regulations, it's a septic system. Still has to be 5 feet to groundwater. There can't be any groundwater within the first 5 feet, so we're still across the street on Pleasant Street. But they wanted to meet with me, and I'll just let them know that really you should be presenting to the board if you're okay with that.
Okay, and if you can, right, and you'll research and update us on what it all means. Then the issue, and this is not something that would have been on my radar, but having read through nuisance issues, have noise nuisance issues come before the Board of Health in the past? Might that be?
I haven't had any
Okay,
received.
but could that be something that?
If you had a loud band there or music
right.
late
That was
at night,
the
it
complaint that
travels.
came up.
Yes, so there
Don't they
was.
call the cops?
Yeah, that's usually how, you're correct, that's how it
Except
should
they're
happen.
debating what to allow in
Disturbance of
terms
the
of
peace.
number of noisy events. And,
Yeah.
low noise.
Wouldn't it only be a health concern if it was above certain decibels? That's a nuisance. Is that us?
Well,
If it's
nuisance is us to some degree.
Yeah, it depends on the town.
Like, who are chickens? Because I feel like this came up at both the select board and the ZBA one, like there's some chicken battle between two people.
And it came to us, too.
Did it come to us?
Yeah.
It's usually the
I mean,
police
there's
and the
nuisance,
board.
On the
like,
noise, so.
that's annoying, or like, I don't like the color of your sign.
Noisome.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, so there's a whole spectrum.
trades.
Or there's dust that I'm inhaling that, like, that's, or
Yeah.
nuisance odor, that I feel like
Oh, yeah,
is
that makes
clearly
sense.
kinda into us, but
Smells, yes,
it's like
sounds, no.
annoying noise that's not actually a safety or health issue, that feels less like,
Although if you're like 51 times a year, there's a band that plays until 11:30 at night.
And your
Next
child
door.
isn't getting enough sleep?
Usually,
yeah, but
it-
That's a health
Usually it's
issue.
the police.
No, I mean, like, that when the Heritage went for their thing so that they could have live music, that had nothing to do with us. And
Yeah.
for the neighbors, it was all about the noise, and that went through zoning
Oh, I
and all
know,
that.
and that's where it's being handled, is
Let's-
that planning
Yeah.
board.
Let's keep it with
So you're
them.
saying
I
we just
don't
want
want
people
it.
mad about cabanas and not
I
anyone
just
else.
didn't know if it could end up in our laps.
I hope
It'd be
Sometimes-
our problem.
Sometimes towns
Rejected.
coordinate both the police department and the Board of Health
What?
when it
Accuse
becomes a
ourselves of
continuous nuisance,
Okay.
chronic.
Okay.
So, but usually the immediate issue is handled by the police, and it depends on your bylaws. Some bylaws already state police shall handle the noise bylaw ordinance. I don't know if the town has a noise bylaw, but if not, it's usually both departments coordinate, especially when it becomes chronic,
Okay,
continuous, then they require us to be part of it.
okay. I think we're going to have to put off the water sustainability because that's so huge, and we've had a lot of discussion on that related tonight.
Can I just ask one question for the
Yep.
195? There was a suggestion in the memorandum from Ellen, from Claire Golden, to kind of seek clarification directly from
About the gray water from.
Right, because again, like, if there's gonna keep going back and forth, do we need to provide Ellen with any guidance to put that question to Clivis?
I think it seems pretty straightforward.
I think it should become, well, we
It should
haven't
come-
received the formal proposal from them on the system, at which point, if some of that stuff is missing,
Okay.
is
But
how
I
I
think
was
they get-
anticipating that they
The
still
ma-
have
they
to
got the
give us
message.
details.
They got the message, because they wanted to meet with me. That just came in
Okay.
last night
Okay.
at
Who got the message?
7:30.
All right.
The engineer, because at 7:30 last night, we received an email that he wants to meet with us to discuss the process of what to do with the gray water, and like I said, he suggested a
Okay.
rain garden, but again, he needs a conventional septic system that will
To receive gray
disperse.
water.
To remove the gray water, and that means it has to be in an area that does not have,
Not a rain garden. If we don't like cesspits, I can't imagine we went that Flynn.
and that wouldn't be, again, I
Not
I don't think.
compliant, right?
No.
All right, actually, I could see where she's saying, since we received the past information from the engineer saying these
That's what
systems
he
are
was
used all
proposing.
over,
Yeah.
and there were details missing that
Yes.
then changed really how one
You
should
cannot-
interpret that
yeah.
information. So maybe on your list of to-do, can you call Clivis?
In fact,
So-
they're going to indicate what Claire already said, and that is you can't put the gray water into
But
the
then I think
Clivis
we can
system.
say, we
Okay.
talked to the vendor, and they said the
Yeah.
proposed use is not allowed.
Yeah.
The state has said
So-
it's not allowed.
Sorry.
Nobody says it's allowed.
And I think Paul has found out that information because he's now looking at another method for the
Yeah.
gray water disposal.
But I
Okay.
would say if you then say that other method's not feasible, I suspect it may come up again, so just having a definitive answer if that is not allowed. There's no tight tanking it.
Okay.
Burden.
Personnel Board, we went to the
Left the plans
meeting
right here.
and
I'm a mess.
had all the documentation. I don't know that they had had a chance to read through what we had sent.
Did they tell us they already approved it like a year ago?
Yes, and we sent
no
it
minutes.
a month or so before the meeting, but in any case, and then we had been told that things were all straightened out, and they did not know of the issue, and so it they're still reviewing, and I'm resending out materials shortly,
Yes.
so
And
that's
Thank
that.
you for the-
the
thank
next
you for your
meeting
work on
with
behalf
them
of the
is
board.
February 27th
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't
nine.
remember that.
at 9 a.m.
That's a super
Oh, yeah,
convenient
yeah, yeah,
time
that's
Wait,
right.
what?
What'd you
for
just say?
volunteer board members.
Wait, Ellen,
The
what did you say?
next,
The next personnel board meeting, when they'll be
Oh.
discussing the clerk position upgrade.
Is that still going on?
yes.
Yes,
Is
Yeah, I
February
don't wanna know.
27th.
there was
at 9 a.m.
progress, but not a lot.
Not all the way?
It seems like a really hard
Okay.
thing.
Yeah. Why are we
Town
spending-
caucus, so I guess I'll run again.
Yay!
That's okay, but again, if you have somebody else in mind, let me know, but I will run. Oh, so
Okay.
many exciting things to keep doing. So,
Okay, signatures.
Look,
And you guys
you
are-
got 2 name tags. How could you leave behind a 2 name tag type situation?
one of those slides very easily.
I think it goes that direction.
So, all right, anyway. All right, we're going to do warrants payroll, we'll save that. Minutes, I had a couple
Yeah.
minor things, change the word THERE
And if
to
there are any must,
they
change
or
it to
something.
shall.
And I don't think I.
Minor things, so.
For the general chemical thing, you said that I said that there were 4 monitor wells. I think I just said monitoring wells. I don't think there's way more than 4 wells.
Yeah, so,
I said they were,
Are we looking at minutes right now?
oh, yeah, installed, okay, instead of 4.
Just say monitoring wells, just don't quote me on it.
That was not me. But you don't have the headphones on, so you're okay.
it goes to next time.
I think I'm still the favorite because I haven't done that to you.
Are you looking at?
Okay,
Right?
so now,
I said I'm still the favorite because I haven't knocked my mic yet.
Oh,
She's still winning.
The only one that
Still
has
the
a
favorite because I haven't knocked my mic
I
yet.
haven't
At
knocked
this
my
meeting
mic
or
either.
Oh, no, but someone else
And
knocked.
Ellen?
We could have like the 21 mic salute.
Oh, I did that?
What?
Did I do that?
No, he would have given you demerits. It's on your
I
permanent
want to be on
record.
his good side.
Yeah.
Okay,
Otherwise, the camera zoom gets real awkward.
all right, so,
So the minutes?
all right, so any other edits for the minutes? Anything
By
that
the way,
people
do
feel
you
is
know
major you
what-
want to discuss?
What did the board of, the planning board make a determination on the Silverwood Farm at the meeting?
More
What did they
information
conclude?
needed.
No,
sounds
they're,
like-
they're getting more info. Okay,
Falling
so do
behind.
we have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
I had an amendment, and I'm just trying to find where it went. I had like several.
Okay, you know what, we're going to move that to the end, so, because we have to get on to signing, so
Here's some
folks can.
signing.
Oh, here it is. Okay, I just found it.
So, I think that's it. So, Rick, you can terminate. We just have signing of plans, a little bit on the minutes, and signing of warrants and payroll. So, thank you.